The Elemental Wizard of Hogwarts Chapter 281-300. Chapter 281 _ Cyclops. The Ministry of Magic's response was still extremely fast. Almost as soon as the shrill cry came out, countless people from the Ministry of Magic apparated and began to counterattack in the vicinity of the group of Death Eaters. Mr. Future is no exception. After telling a wave of Sirius to take the children away safely, he disappeared in front of everyone in an instant. Seal looked at the chaotic scenes below. The wizards present rarely fought back. Except for some officials of the Ministry of Magic, most of them fled like ordinary people in danger. He raised his head and looked at the Cyclops, who was still stunned for some reason. Ciel's brows, which had been locked when the chaos occurred, began to beat continuously, and a bad premonition suddenly climbed the mountain. Mind. Ciel no longer hesitated, and called Fuchs for the first time. Following Ciel's call, Fuchs turned into a flame and appeared beside Ciel. Fox, take everyone but me to a safe place. Then go and inform the teacher immediately. Ciel gave Fox an order without the slightest hesitation. If it was originally a Death Eater, Ciel would not be so nervous, but the appearance of the Cyclops obviously broke Ciel's original fantasy about this crisis. The reason is very simple. The Cyclops is a pure ancient species. According to the records of history books, the Cyclops has disappeared for almost 100 years. Now, the sudden appearance of the Cyclops makes Ciel feel that his eyelids are beating all the time, especially the size and magic resistance of the Cyclops far exceeding that of ordinary giants. Shox has deep memories of Ravenclaw and Slytherin experience. At their time, dealing with Cyclops required a large number of wizards and elemental wizards to work together to do it. As soon as Ciel gave the order, Fox spread his wings and flew at an extremely fast speed, and in a blink of an eye, everyone except Ciel gathered together. Hermione had thought about breaking free from Fox and came to Shaw. I want to help Ciel by my side. But Fox didn't give Hermione any chance at all. After gathering everyone together, before Hermione rushed out, Fox let out a loud and long cry, and immediately took the Weasley family. Harry and Hermione were extremely excited. Sirius replaced it with a huge flame on the venue for hours. The huge cry and the dazzling flames attracted the attention of the Death Eaters present and the Cyclops almost at the moment of its appearance. The Death Eaters were okay to say, but after confirming that it was the Phoenix's cry, the eyes of all the Death Eaters present immediately became frantic for some reason, as if they had found a target, and the faces under the masks were unconscious. The beginning of the war was twisted, as if something major was about to happen. As for the Cyclops, he was still in a daze on the side of the venue. After seeing the firelight brought by Fox, he was still a little sluggish, and he was immediately attracted by Fox. After Fox disappeared with the crowd, the Cyclops stared blankly at Ciel, who was not as big as his fingernails, and his eyes gradually became angry. Ciel didn't expect that Fox's operation would attract the attention of the Cyclops. After looking at the Cyclops with a solemn expression, Ciel could basically confirm an indisputable fact, that he was definitely the Cyclops's goal. Don't have to run. In fact, Ciel guessed very correctly. After One Eye determined Ciel's position, he immediately became angry, roaring and crashing through the entire Quidditch World Cup arena and rushing in. For a while, the already panicked arena became even more chaotic. Under the impact of the giant's forehead, both the Death Eaters present and the wizards who were fighting back began to avoid the gravel and other things brought by the giant crashing through the arena. Seeing the giant rushing into the arena, Ciel no longer hesitated, and immediately a bright golden flame ignited on his body, constantly mobilizing the surrounding elements. It's just that when the giant completely rushed into the arena, it made the vigilant Ciel stunned. The Cyclops, who should have been muscular, only the upper body was still intact. As for the lower body of the Cyclops, it was like another person's body stitched to the lower body of a Cyclops. If the entire lower body of the Cyclops is to be described, it can only be said to be dilapidated, and even in some places, the rotten internal organs and bones can be vaguely seen. What kind of strange situation suddenly made everyone present stunned, and suddenly some did not know what to do, but the smile on the face of the Death Eater who avoided the gravel and rubble brightened. The moment a seemingly leading Death Eater saw the giant rushing in, he began to laugh wildly. Ha 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 ha, filthy mudbloods, feel the gift from Lord Dark Lord to you. Go. After speaking, the Death Eater turned into a cloud of black smoke and appeared on the top of the Cyclops' head, and then very quickly used an unknown magic on the Cyclops' head. After being enchanted by the Death Eater Mayor, the Cyclops, who was originally just a little angry, began to corrode continuously, which was still in good condition, and the entire Cyclops became extremely dark and hideous almost in an instant. When he got up, even the huge one eye on his face began to emit a strange red light. After seeing the changes in the Cyclops, the Death Eaters immediately stopped their attacks, and they all grinned and disappeared into the venue as a cloud of black smoke. After the Death Eater standing above the Cyclops finished casting his magic, he grinned and looked at Charles, who was still standing opposite the stand, and said loudly, "Charles Lancaster, this is the little boy sent to you by Lord Dark Lord. Gift, and, Lord Dark Lord wants me to bring you a message. I want you to enjoy this little gift. Lord Dark Lord is very much looking forward to the next meeting." After finishing speaking, the head of the Death Eaters fired a Voldemort mark into the sky, grinning and disappearing into the venue as a plume of black smoke. With the appearance of the Black Demon mark, the giant standing in the venue began to gradually become arrogant as if he had received some signal, roaring and rushing towards CL's stand. Shah didn't care about other things. Looking at the strange Cyclops who rushed over to him, the flames on Shah gradually became brighter. Immediately after Shah waved his hand, a huge golden flame, the Eastern Dragon, appeared, roaring towards the Cyclops. The Cyclops looked at the flaming dragon rushing over, and did not flinch. The one who opened his teeth and claws scuffled with the flaming dragon of Seal. The officials of the surrounding Ministry of Magic were relieved to see the Death Eaters retreat, but in a blink of an eye they saw the Cyclops and the flamed dragon fighting together, and they were a little confused for a while. Before the officials of the Ministry of Magic could react, Ciel's voice appeared in everyone's ears along with a gust of wind. "People from the Ministry of Magic, organize an evacuation immediately, and I will try my best to hold back this damn monster to buy you time." As Ciel's voice fell, everyone from the Ministry of Magic looked at me and I looked at you. In the end, Mr. Weasley responded the fastest, roaring and hurriedly organized an evacuation. The time of the Ministry of Magic was just like waking up from a dream and immediately acted. It's just that when everyone leaves, their eyes will unconsciously look at the young man who is standing at the highest place, who is burning with golden flames and controls the dragon and the giant to fight. Chapter 282-Shire in Gundam. Not to mention the evacuation of the organization that the Ministry of Magic faced directly, but it was obvious that something was wrong with Ciel. Ciel, who controlled the flame dragon, obviously felt that the control of the dragon was getting more and more difficult. Even with the addition of the fire element, Ciel could clearly sense that the dragon's body was constantly getting smaller and even becoming more and more difficult to control. This kind of situation made Ciel feel a wave of panic gradually spreading in his heart. The fire element that was supposed to burn everything was actually not so easy to use in front of this strange Cyclops. You must know that the fire element is an ordinary wizard and the like, but there is no ash that can be burned when it touches it. This giant is obviously a little tricky. Ciel tried his best to restrain his surprise. He observed the battle between the flame dragon and the strange one-eyed giant in a short script. As Ciel observed and sensed, the surprise in his heart grew more and more. The strange black, rotten aura on the giant's body is constantly eroding the elements on the flame dragon of Ciel. Whenever the fire element touches the black aura on the giant's body, a large part of it will be invalidated, and even a small part of the fire element will be assimilated and eaten directly by the giants. In other words, this weird one-eyed giant will become stronger and stronger in the battle with the Char's fire element dragon, but on the contrary, the Char's side will become more and more weak. Ciel, who sensed such a situation, became more and more frightened. He couldn't spend it like this, otherwise, he would definitely be the one who couldn't bear it first. A simple glance at the venue, The Ministry of Magic may not be very good at fighting, but they are definitely first-class masters in organizing escape. With the efforts of the Ministry of Magic, the originally chaotic crowd gradually remembered that they were still wizards. They apparated and left the venue. The remaining wizards who could not apparate were taken away by the Ministry of Magic. At this time, in addition to the gravel and rubble, there were only countless dilapidated corpses left. Seeing that the entire venue was empty, Seal also decided not to hold his hands anymore. After sighing softly, Seal's eyes when looking at the Cyclops immediately became sharp. Pushing forward with both hands, the flame dragon that had been fighting with the Cyclops instantly increased in size, and within a few breaths, the Cyclops stumbled back more than 10 steps. Before the Cyclops could stand still, the giant dragon rushed in front of the giant. With a loud explosion, the Cyclops let out a miserable howl. There was a loud noise and even everyone who had moved to the campsite outside the venue could feel the ground trembling under their feet, and even many people looked at the venue that was constantly being destroyed with complex eyes, not knowing where it was. What to think? With the Cyclops falling to the ground, Sha'ur also felt a little annoyed, especially in the cognition of Sha'ur who had been away from a lot of things a while ago, and many things that had not appeared in the original books also appeared in Sha at this time. In Ur's mind. For a while, Seal couldn't help but feel a rush of fire. At this time, Seal didn't intend to keep his hands, and his eyes gradually became sharp. Sha'ur pressed his hands on the ground, and then tried his best to slowly lift it up. The flame that was still entangled in Sha'ur's body turned into a dazzling thunder in an instant, and the crackling sound exploded around the venue in an instant. As Seal raised his hand slowly, the wally gravel on the ground and the reinforced iron tools scattered all over the ground began to quickly gather around Seal, as if he had received some inexplicable summons. Even the crumbling venue was now under the shroud of Seal's elemental power, and began to gradually collapse, scattered, and began to gather around Seal. When Seal's hands were almost raised to the vicinity of his waist, a huge half-length human-shaped stone statue with a height of 100 meters appeared at the feet of Seal. The Cyclops who was lying on the ground had already climbed up at this time, and he shook his head as he was still in a daze, and looked at the huge half-human-shaped object that suddenly appeared opposite him. As if something had been accomplished, in an instant, Seal's hands gathered above his head, and the dark clouds that were constantly rolling over began to spin on top of Seal's head as if they had been summoned. At an extremely fast speed, it turned into a huge vortex of dark clouds, which looked quite apocalyptic. Everyone who escaped from the venue stared blankly at everything that happened in the distant venue. The scene, like the end of the day, was deeply engraved in everyone's eyes, whether it was adults or children, they are all grown up at this moment. Looking at the scene in front of his mouth and clothes in surprise, many people have even begun to doubt whether this kind of scene can really be accomplished by humans. At this time, Seal has no experience to care what others think. Even when he decided to completely destroy this strange giant, Seal even forgot the instructions that Dumbledore said. At this time, Seal was full of thoughts on how to complete his magic. As soon as he mastered the natural elements, Seal understood one thing, that is, the meaning of natural elements is completely above nature. In other words, as long as Seal wants to complete an elemental magic, as long as Seal has specific ideas, other elements will help Seal to complete it. Just as it is now, Seal seems to feel something more, and following his instinct, Seal forcefully waved his raised hand down. Immediately, a dazzling white light rushed out from the swirling dark clouds, accompanied by a huge thunderous sound. One after another huge lightning bolt continuously bombarded the scribbled demi-human created by Seal. After the thunder light dissipated, what appeared in front of people was a very fine bust of Zeus with a height of 100 meters and covered with thunder light. Seal, on the other hand, was panting on top of Zeus's head, looking at the Cyclops that was a little shorter than the Zeus he had created. The Cyclops had regained consciousness at this time, and looking at the statue of Zeus standing opposite him with a look of contempt, it was like a natural anger in his blood that shot straight to the sky again from the bottom of his heart. The giant let out an angry roar, and the black aura all over his body rolled up again, forcibly raising the giant's height by a few meters. Immediately, like a berserker, he roared and charged towards the huge Zeus image of Seal. Seal looked at the rushing giant and smiled disdainfully, then raised his hands to control the bust of Zeus and started punching against the giant. Seal's Zeus is like every time he throws his fist, and the fist is accompanied by a flash of thunder. As long as it hits the giant, it is a black existence. On the other hand, the giant with a black fist hits Seal's body. There is a sense of innocence on the Zeus statue, and even the strong black gas entangled in the giant's fist will dissipate a lot. Under the situation, the giant gradually became weaker, and Seal seized the opportunity to control Zeus to bombard it all at once. Chapter 283 _ The end of the battle and its aftermath. The giant who was bombarded by Seal seemed to beckoning a huge shame, quickly got up from the ground, and angrily hammered the ground with both hands. And constantly issued a roar of unknown meaning, accompanied by the giant's roar. The black gas that had been somewhat dissipated rolled up again, and gradually became manic. Slowly, the black energy began to gather in the giant's hand, and it slowly turned into a huge mallet exuding black energy. At the same time, at the moment when the black chi-wrapped club appeared, the giant, who still looked a little sturdy, seemed to have been drained of its strength. The body of the giant began to shrivel and rotted at a speed visible to the naked eye. By the time the club was completed, the entire giant had become skinny, and even the originally intact abdominal cavity was already rotten. The internal organs and other things have broken through the barrier of the belly and scattered on the ground. However, the giant seemed to be completely unaware of his own condition, and stood up regardless of his own condition, and uttered a huge roar at the Zeus statue at the foot of Jisha. "Come over." When Seal saw the rushing giant, he was no longer ambiguous. He slowly raised his right hand. Following Seal's movements, the statue of Zeus under Seal's feet also slowly raised his right hand. Just like the picture in the myth, a huge thunder appeared in the hands of Zeus in an instant, and Seal, who was standing on top of Zeus's head, looked at the giant rushing over and laughed disdainfully. Immediately, he aimed at the Thunder Man who rushed over and picked up the giant who wanted to give Seal a blow to the head. Accompanied by a huge roar, a white light that made people unable to open their eyes flashed, and a huge and mushy smell swept through the entire venue in an instant, and even everyone in the campsite was experiencing the repetition. After the natural disaster like white light, you can smell that strong and more mushy smell. As for the originally aggressive giant, at this time, under the bombardment of the huge thunder spear in the hand of Zeus created by Seal, it had become a charred bone, lying motionless on the ground. Seal looked at the motionless giant in front of him, and controlled Zeus very uneasy like a fist to smash the head of the giant that had turned into a dead bone. After finishing all this, Seal inexplicably felt a comfortable feeling rising from the bottom of his heart, and even vaguely Seal even felt that some elements around him were cheering for him. It was as if they had collectively accomplished something huge. The elements that were originally harmonious with Sha-Ching actually became more friendly with Sha at this time. Even the natural element thunder element that I just mastered faintly seems to fit more closely with myself. Before Seal could continue to feel his own transformation, a huge sense of powerlessness enveloped Seal's body almost instantly. Seal suddenly became unable to control himself and fell backwards. Fortunately, before Seal fell, two figures instantly appeared behind Seal. The two figures, one black and the other white, supported the fallen Seal on the left and the right. Charles tried his best to wake himself up. After seeing the faces of the two, he was no longer worried and was very relieved. Eyes closed and fainted. It was Grindelwald and Dumbledore who came. Dumbledore actually arrived a long time ago. After Fawkes sent everyone back to the camp, he immediately contacted Dumbledore. Dumbledore followed Fawkes to the vicinity of the venue with almost no delay. It's just that before Dumbledore could help Seal, Dumbledore was blocked by a figure. It was Grindelwald. After Grindelwald's explanation, Dumbledore was relieved to stand with Grindelwald and watch Seal's battle, until after Seal fully understood Cyclops, he saw that the two were wrong. Only in an instant he appeared behind Seal and supported Seal, who had lost his strength. Has he completely completed his degeneration? Dumbledore looked at the unconscious Seal with worried eyes, and looked at Grindelwald opposite him with uncertain eyes. Grindelwald was very happy to look at Seal, who had passed out in his arms, with an unusually brilliant smile, and then continued, "It should be. In the ancient books I found, it is stated that the advancement of elements is a great adventure. This battle will undoubtedly help Seal to better integrate the natural elements and complete the transformation." Quote. Dumbledore mentioned Grindelwald's words on the computer, and said nothing, just nodded silently, looking at the corpse of the giant who had turned into a dead bone on the ground with worried eyes, opened his mouth several times but said nothing. Looking at Dumbledore's appearance, Grindelwald almost immediately understood Dumbledore's concerns. His eyes became sharp, and he said after a while, "Don't worry, Seal's natural elements can almost restrain Voldemort's undead breath. This time, this kid has no experience to create such a big battle." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Dumbledore nodded, but the worry in his eyes did not dissipate in the slightest. "No, I am not worried about Voldemort, but about the forces behind him, knowing that Cyclops has disappeared for a long time, and there's clearly something wrong with this Cyclops." Hearing Dumbledore's worries, Grindelwald's brows wrinkled unconsciously, and then he continued, "Don't worry, I will investigate. If nothing else, such a large-scale effort will only be found in the entire magical world. Those goblins are hiding deep inside. I leave this matter to me. What you should be worrying about now is how the event of eating should end. You must know that the people in the entire World Cup, except for the unlucky ones who were killed at the beginning, are mostly people who have seen the Battle of Seal in their entirety." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Dumbledore let out a rare smile, and then continued, "Don't worry, I will handle it. You take this little guy and leave first, and I will find a way later." Grindelwald nodded, and before he could make any extra moves, the Zeus statue under the two of them vibrated for a while, and Kaka's voice began to be heard continuously. Almost immediately, Dumbledore and Grindelwald understood that the huge bust beneath their feet would not last long after Jaws had lost control. "I'll take Seal and go first. Don't forget to come to me after you've dealt with it. I'm going to investigate the issue about this giant," Grindelwald instructed Dumbledore, and then turned around to take Seal to apparate away. Dumbledore nodded and turned to look at the corpse of the giant lying on the ground. "Be careful, there is still time, don't forget what you promised me." Grindelwald waved his hand, did not answer Dumbledore, and immediately left with a direct apparition, but Dumbledore stood on the constantly crumbling statue of Zeus and looked at the Cyclops lying on the ground. His brows tightened. Wrinkle didn't know what he was thinking about. After a long time, Dumbledore sighed, "Things are starting to get complicated." After he finished speaking, with a twist, Dumbledore also disappeared on the head of Zeus. With Dumbledore's disappearance, the entire High Zeus seemed to have received some signal, and it shattered into countless pieces in an instant. Neither Dumbledore nor Grindelwald noticed. After they both left the scene of the Battle of the Shire, on the other side away from the venue and the campsite, a small figure gradually put down the telescope in his hand. After muttering in a low voice, it turned into a puff of black smoke and disappeared in place. Chapter 284 Subsequent Impact. Seal fainted happily and didn't know what happened next, but Dumbledore, who stayed to deal with the mess, said that it was a headache to the point of ascending to heaven. After Grindelwald left with Seal, Dumbledore sighed slightly and walked out of the battlefield alone, facing countless reporters and officials of the Ministry of Magic. After a while of deceiving him, Dumbledore finally convinces everyone that the last big Zeus statue and the thunder that filled the sky were not Seal, but he and Seal made it together. Among them, Seal just made the huge bust of steel mixed with rubble, and the rest was made after he took over. As for what spell he used, Dumbledore said that this was magic obtained from an ancient magic book, and it was very difficult, even for him to cast it again. As for whether other people believe it or not, that is completely out of Dumbledore's plan. Anyway, Dumbledore explained it to the point where he almost believed it. As for someone who asked where the hero of the whole battle, Seal, went, Dumbledore said that a child who had just entered the 4th grade, who created such a huge magic, still wanted him to come out. Of course, it was the car wheel talk that Fox would send him to a place to treat his injuries. Anyway, the final result was that although everyone was in a state of dubious belief, there was no evidence to refute Dumbledore's words for a while. After all, none of the people present had ever been close to the battlefield. What is the situation in the specific battlefield, and only Dumbledore who came out of the battlefield can be said to understand. As for the follow-up want to enter the battlefield, it was even more wishful thinking. The moment Dumbledore walked out, the entire Quidditch World Cup venue was blocked by officials of the Ministry of Magic in the name of eliminating danger. No one should even try to go in and see what's going on. Even Dumbledore had to say that Fudge did a very good job cleaning the battlefield and dealing with the follow-up and things like that. As for Dumbledore's words, whether Fudge believes it or not, that's another story. Before Dumbledore left, he deliberately found Hermione and his party, and reported the whereabouts of Seal to everyone, so that everyone should not worry. Seal was not surprised, just simply lost his strength. This made Hermione, who was worried about dying, breathe a sigh of relief, but then a sense of frustration quietly rose in the little girl's heart. The reason is very simple. I originally thought that if I had mastered some ancient magic, I could stand by Seal's side to help him resist some pressure, but seeing the destructive battle just now, Hermione knew that even if she had mastered ancient magic, I'm afraid it's hard to reach the height of the boy who used to stand beside him and always acted as a funny knight to make him happy. Dumbledore can also be said to be a meticulous existence, and among the cheering crowd, he soon found a somewhat disappointed Hermione. Perhaps it was his emotional failure that caused Dumbledore to be very concerned about Shire's emotional state. Under the love of the house and woo, Dumbledore's concern for Hermione sometimes exceeded his concern for Harry. While everyone was busy celebrating the rest of their lives and their hero Seal, Dumbledore quietly walked over to Hermione and patted Hermione on the shoulder. "Have time. Maybe you'd like to talk to me." Dumbledore winked mischievously at Hermione, trying to make his tone a little more relaxed, trying to make Hermione uncomfortable and nervous. Hermione looked at Dumbledore's appearance, still did not adjust her mood, but nodded a little disappointedly. No one noticed the two people who had disappeared quietly in the lively tent. Anyway, when Hermione appeared again, she was very happy with a shabby-looking book in her hand, and she was even a little lost. The expression on his face no longer exists, and he even vaguely looks like he is fighting spirit. Early the next morning, when Mr. Weasley exhausted and brought everyone back to the burrow except Shire, Mrs. Weasley was so excited. The children who have been holding Weasley for a season are constantly crying, explaining their own worries and regrets, and the last word they almost said to everyone was actually a scolding. On the contrary, the twins hugged their mother under the constant teasing, and Mrs. Weasley began to regret that she had just leaked her true expression. On this side, the Weasley family, Harry and Hermione can be said to be happy and get along happily, and even Mrs. Weasley did not forget to thank everyone for the unknown Charles. But the magic world other than the burrow can be said to be undercurrent, and all forces are constantly beginning to investigate Seal and Dumbledore. As for the reason, it's very simple. Whether it's Seal or Dumbledore, the overwhelming thunder at the end made everyone feel terrified, especially when Dumbledore walked out of the battlefield alone, no matter which party it was. The power of Dumbledore's master and apprentice began to be apprehensive. One of the most angry is Fudge, the current Minister of Magic, who had just returned from the Quidditch World Cup scene in the morning when he was chubby. Just the mere post-war scene made Fudge feel frightened, especially when the charred Cyclops' bones were excavated from a pile of broken Wally rubble. Fudge scolded the person in charge of the entire match on the spot, and even the director of the Auror office, who was standing by the side, did not escape. No one can explain how this huge Cyclops, which can be said to be an iron tower, appeared, and even where the species of Cyclops came from, no one can explain clearly. When Fudge returned to the office after venting, he felt a deep sense of powerlessness and fear, especially when he thought that he wanted to recruit Seal to deal with Dumbledore. Sitting in his office, Fudge began to keep thinking about how the two masters and apprentices would mock him in Dumbledore's undead office when they were at Hogwarts. Especially now that Seal has shown talent no less than Dumbledore's, Fudge is starting to have a headache, knowing that even if Dumbledore doesn't care about his current position, it doesn't mean that name is written as Seal and read as Dumbledore. The guy of the second generation of Leto is not spying on his position. Especially when the Daily Prophet was delivered to Fudge's office today, the unease in his heart became more and more obvious after seeing the front page of the newspaper. Chapter 285-Gold Coin and Daily Prophet. Front page headlines. The shocking scene of last night's Quidditch World Cup. Dumbledore's master and apprentice turned the tide. In a huge office, the gold coin with the look of a profiteer put down the newspaper in his hand, and began to grope for his wide chin and began to think. After it rang for a while, the gold coin called to his subordinates, "Come on. Go and ask if the shadow is back." The Banshee secretary who had just entered the office at the call of the Golden Cup did not say anything after hearing the words of the golden coin, but simply nodded and then bowed and walked out. After a while, the female secretary took a document and entered the golden coin office again. After putting down the tightly wrapped documents, the female secretary bowed down and exited the golden coin office again. Huge office. Seeing the female secretary back out, Gold Coin slowly picked up the document on the table and looked at it. This document was nothing else, it was the real record of everything that happened at the Quidditch venue that night. The goblin that no one else discovered that day was the person with the gold coins. As a goblin who also had a golden beak mask, even Dumbledore and Grindelwald, the two most powerful wizards in the world, were already in their name. As an ally, the gold coins will not be completely relieved. Therefore, in a place unknown to everyone, Gin Coin, a goblin who has a deep hatred with Chaos Kingdom, naturally developed a secret team of its own among the entire goblin group. Everyone in this team is the same as gold coins, without exception. They are extremely hostile to their own race, and there are even many people who, like gold coins, hate the Parliament and the country of chaos, the violent organs under the Parliament. It's just that unlike the goblins in Chaos Realm who like to master magic, the gold coin team is extremely averse to magic, and it can even be said that magic is rarely used when it is not necessary. The entire chaotic realm is completely equipped with Muggle technology, and even a lot of training is based on the training of troops in the Muggle world. It is precisely because of this that this team of gold coins has existed for so many years in secret under the eyes of the entire fairies. Thinking of the chaotic country, Gin Coin's eyes became blood red again. As an original Gin Galleon, Gin Coin can be said to be diligently surrounding the council composed of 5 fairies. But just because of the failure of a mission, coupled with the internal power struggle, the punishment given to the Gold Cup by the 5-member council turned out to be that the relatives of the gold coins were refined into playthings in their hands in front of the gold coins. An ordinary handle piece. He even abolished the magic power in the gold coin body under the suggestion of Jin Jalong, turning the gold coin into a complete squib goblin, and even lost the status of Jin Jalong. If it hadn't been for the gold coin to climb up to the top of Gringotts on the bright side once again with his clever mind and business talent, the gold coin might not have been able to get in touch with the 5 most powerful people in the fairies in this life. Even now, the status of gold coins in fairies is not much different from that of squibs in wizards, and even a little lower. After all, in the eyes of fairies, the existence of gold coins is just a moving ATM. For fairies who seek rights, they are also innocuous existences. The blood-red gold coin took a deep breath for a long time and then guessed slowly to calm down the hatred in his heart, and patiently began to read the report in his hand. It's just that the more I look at it, the more excited Gin Coin is. There is no other reason. According to the scene described in the report, if Dumbledore and Grindelwald are added together, the 3 of them still have their own inner and outer cooperation. Gin Coin feels that he can still do it in this life. To the complete destruction of chaos and that damn Council of 5. Although there are countless collaborators in the entire Goblin group, and even some big devils like Voldemort, as well as some evil magical creations, Gold Coin still feels that he always sees hope. Seeing CL's great power on the report, Goldcoin suddenly thought of what Dumbledore said in the Daily Prophet, and Goldcoin was also a little puzzled for a while. Frowning and thinking, Gincoin's fingers kept tapping on the report on the table. Only after cooking wine did Gincoin understand the key points. He stood up and smiled and threw the report in his hand into the fireplace in the office. Watching the report gradually turn to ashes in the fireplace, the Goldcoin summoned his secretary again. Go and tell the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet that I will arrange an exclusive interview with Dumbledore. This time the incident must be reported extensively. By the way, ask the reporters of the Daily Prophet to interview the Ministry of Magic. How on earth did the Cyclops appear on the scene? And what does the appearance of the Death Eaters represent? These are the breaking points of the news. I'm going to see the Ministry's explanation on the headlines tomorrow. Do you understand? The secretary nodded, but there was still some hesitation on his face. After talking for a while, he said, Boss, will this make the above aware of our intentions? Hearing the secretary's question, Gincoin smiled disdainfully. No, they should be happy. The more the Ministry of Magic has no reason, the more control they have over the Ministry of Magic. I give them this instead. Created an opportunity to avoid the important and ignore it. Fuji, that idiot knows better than anyone else. Quote. Hearing Gincoin's answer, the secretary no longer hesitated, nodding his head, and once again launched the Gincoin office to do the Goldcoin account. The Goldcoin was left alone in the office and began to pace and think about the next countermeasures. Basically, he had already helped Dumbledore to do everything he could, and tried to weaken the role of Seal in this catastrophe. Even in order not to expose his own goals, he even cheated on Fuji, a wine bag and rice bag who only knew how to hold money, and he could let his gang of mortal enemies have a deeper control over the Ministry of Magic. As long as those bastards get more entangled with the Ministry of Magic, and even more deeply with Voldemort, the more they will be removed when they fight back. This point has always been the primary goal of Goldcoin. The Goldcoin is naturally happy in the matter of killing two birds with one stone. As for the only problem now, it is only the situation of Seal, who has been successfully promoted to a high-level combat force in the heart of Goldcoin. After all, the last thing that Goldcoins want is that there are any mistakes in the cards in his hand before the decisive battle. Chapter 286-Char Regaining Consciousness. Seal lay directly at the location arranged by Dumbledore for a whole day, and it was not until the next morning that Seal woke up in a daze. The first person Seal saw was sitting beside his bed Dumbledore, holding a book and reading with relish. Teacher, where is Mistress? Seal, who was still a little confused, slapped his skin almost subconsciously. Dumbledore, who was still reading a book in a comfortable manner, twitched the corners of his eyes unnaturally after hearing Ciel's words. After Dumbledore was silent for a while, he answered Ciel's question slowly. You can still give it a shot. It seems that you really don't have any problem with who you are. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel's head that was still a little confused suddenly came to his senses, and he did it quickly, looking at Dumbledore with an embarrassed look on his face. I'm wrong, but I'll dare next time. Dumbledore sighed helplessly, and then continued, Don't worry, Grindelwald left yesterday after I came back. He still has a lot of things to investigate, so he left early. After hearing Dumbledore's explanation, Seal also knew that what happened just now was a turnaround, so he lay down very lazily and returned to Jayu's paralyzed posture. After a while, he continued, Teacher. Hermione must be worried, right? Hearing Ciel's concern, Dumbledore closed the book, looked at Ciel with a smile, and replied, Don't worry, I'll tell them about your situation. She should still be living with the Weasleys. Waiting for you to go back to Diagon Alley to buy things for the new semester together. It's you, how are you feeling now? After hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel smirked for a while at first, but after hearing Dumbledore's question, Ciel rolled his eyes helplessly, and then answered casually, Me. What else can I do? I'm fine. Ciel didn't finish his words, because in the interval between the words, Ciel felt his state with his hands. This feeling didn't matter, but it made him break out in a cold sweat. In Ciel's perception, The original soul was still a static ball with 4 elements, but now it has become a lush look. If you don't even distinguish carefully, you will think that this ball is floating in your soul. The stuff in it is the earth in real life. The whole ball is all-encompassing on the mountains, rivers, oceans, grasslands, forests, clouds and sky, and it looks very beautiful. If this small change in the acting wasn't enough to surprise Seal, what surprised Seal the most was the huge amount of magic power in his body after absorbing the magic power of the magic stone after completing the advanced stage. Disappeared without a trace. Just like an ordinary muggle, no matter how Seal feels, there is nothing related to magic in his body. Such a change suddenly made Seal panic, and he was trying magic. After the splendor, Seal realizes that he has absolutely no courage to face a self who has lost his magic power. Seal, who was originally a paralyzed Ju, started to do it all at once, grabbed Dumbledore's arm all of a sudden, and explained his situation with a terrified tone. Different from Seal's panic, Dumbledore still looked like an ancient well, as if Seal's panic at this time had already been expected by him. Seal, on the other hand, did not notice Dumbledore's appearance at all. He was just describing some of his own changes, and he became more and more frightened. He even said that Seal had already started thinking about investing in the ancient East. If so, will you be able to be rich and prosperous in this life? Dumbledore sighed helplessly as Seal went from being frightened to being lonely, and then he waved his hand calmly, and then said, "Calm down, Seal, calm down, cast a spell and let me see how." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal, who was a little lonely, rolled his eyes angrily. He kept complaining in his heart that this old dang was probably confused. He couldn't feel the magic power himself. But on the surface, Seal still held a fluke in his heart, stretched out his fingers and whispered a fluorescent light. With the fall of Seal's voice, a small ball of light suddenly appeared at the fingertips of Seal. A huge doubt appeared in Seal's heart. Seal closed his eyes and felt it carefully, and once again confirmed that he could not feel any magic power. But the light ball on his fingertips told him that he did not lose the ability to cast magic. Not only that, Seal can even clearly perceive that he can completely control the light ball on his fingertips, whether it is bigger, or turned into a flash bomb or a flashlight when he is alive. You can clearly perceive that no matter what kind of change it is, you only need a little thought of yourself. This change made Seal full of doubts, and looked at Dumbledore sitting opposite him with puzzled eyes. Dumbledore didn't say anything. At this time, he was also feeling the magic of Seal. After a long time, a smile appeared on Dumbledore's face, and he continued, "It's really amazing, just like Grindelwald said, it's amazing." Seeing Dumbledore's appearance, Seal looked bewildered. After a brief thought, Seal asked in a low voice, "Teacher, what's the situation?" Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore smiled even more happily, and then explained to Seal, "Congratulations, Seal, now you have completed your natural transformation. If you put it in ancient times, you can already a true demigod." After Dumbledore finished speaking, Seal did not understand what Dumbledore meant. He still looked at his teacher with a cute expression on his face. After Dumbledore saw that Seal was still confused, he said slowly, "This is a clue that Grindelwald recently found in an ancient book. When an elemental mage masters the natural elements, then it is the beginning of his transformation, but such transformation is often extremely long, so long that many people have been taken away by the passage of time without completing the transformation. But in the long period of time, there has always been the genius of wizards, and one of them discovered the key point of accelerating mutation, that is, a battle that risked his life, and a battle that completely drained himself. When the battle is completed and victorious, it is the period of complete transformation." Listening to Dumbledore's explanation, Seal's first reaction was to doubt that he was really going to die according to what Dumbledore said. So in the ancient times, it was the days when true gods were everywhere, and there were as many demigods as dogs. It is absolutely impossible for a person to survive in such an environment. Seeing Seal's suspicion, Dumbledore said with a smile, "Don't doubt, Seal, you must know that not everyone is transformed at your age. In a long time, the guys who completed the transformation were without exception the most powerful elemental mages of the year. You must know that a guy of my age and your level wants a battle to drain his life. It is absolutely impossible to meet, and it may even happen because the aftermath is too big, even if he wins. Still dying in the aftermath. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal wanted to understand this. It's true that a weak guy like himself who masters the natural elements is the only existence in the entire history of the Scorpion. Seeing that Seal wanted to understand the key point, Dumbledore smiled and continued, as for your magic power, according to ancient books, the most direct difference between demigods and mortals is magic power. We use magic power to distort reality to achieve the purpose of releasing magic, and the demigods who have truly completed the transformation are no longer disdainful of using such low-level things as magic power. Chapter 287 Gotta Pay More. This set of Dumbledore's descriptions of wizards and demigods circled around for a long time, and successfully made Charles dizzy. Until now, Charles's concept of magic power and the nature of magic has I don't know much about the set. Charles, who turned into mosquito coil eyes, waved his hands helplessly, and then said, okay, teacher, it doesn't matter, anyway, I know it's good not to delay my use of magic. Seeing Seal looking like a rogue, Dumbledore blew his beard and stared, but there was nothing he could do. After all, not everyone has such a perfect talent as Seal. More and more people gradually discovered the opportunity to become an elemental mage on the road of constantly exploring the essence of magic, or they gradually mastered the elements by mastering and using some elemental spells invented by ancient wizards. And then turned down the magic essence. Like Seal, who automatically and inexplicably became an elemental mage without any hindrance, and once again became a demigod without any hindrance, such as divine help, even Dumbledore would drool with envy. Fortunately, Seal is a disciple of Dumbledore, and the relationship between the two is still relatively close, which will not make Dumbledore feel any jealousy, but if the way of Seal leaks out a little bit, then it is estimated that the entire magical world as the old monsters would go mad with jealousy. Thinking of this, Dumbledore sighed helplessly, and then said as if he remembered something, by the way, Charles, there is one more thing you must know. When he said this, Dumbledore paused for a while, and the face that was originally a mountain that collapsed and did not change color was rarely hung with a trace of embarrassment. After sorting out his thoughts, he continued. In order to hide your strength, Grindelwald and I discussed it after you fell into a coma, and finally decided not to expose you to the public's sight so early. I hope you don't have any superfluous thoughts. Looking at Dumbledore's embarrassed face, and even because of shame, Dumbledore's old face was rarely red, and Seal tried hard not to smile in Dumbledore's face. After holding back for a long time, Charles slowly calmed down his smile, and then continued, it doesn't matter, teacher, I don't want to face those annoying and pervasive reporters so early, especially those unscrupulous journalists who will do anything for the news. Quote. Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore let out a slow sigh of relief. Just now, he was especially worried that he was going to die. If Seal knew that he had falsely claimed the credit that belonged to him, he would treat him like an ordinary young man. What disparity arises? But I never expected that Seal's salted fish had reached such a level that he didn't care or even said that he was even a little fortunate. It's just that Dumbledore's tone hadn't been relieved for too long, and Seal's next sentence directly let Dingbrado's heart, which had been put down, was raised again. Teacher, is there a newspaper? I'll see what it says on it. Seeing Seal looking at himself curiously, Dumbledore had no choice but to take out yesterday's Daily Prophet and hand it to Seal. Seal was not polite, he opened the front page and started to read it. It's just that the more he looked at, the more he frowned, until after he read the whole report, he frowned and put down the newspaper and looked at his teacher. Seeing Seal frowning, Dumbledore still sighed inwardly. He also understood Seal's unhappiness. He should have been young and frivolous, especially when Seal had done such a big thing. Should stand under the flashlight and enjoy the treatment of a hero, but now he and Grindelwald asked him to let go of all this. Dumbledore asked himself if he was the age of the Seal and faced the same thing, and Dumbledore swore that neither himself nor Grindelwald would be furious. Charles. Dumbledore was interrupted by Charles waving his hand. Charles frowned at the newspaper, and then pointed to the front page of the newspaper with a slightly uncomfortable tone. Teacher, why does it still have my name on it? The second Dumbledore. Teacher, you can't do it either, you just say that the bust is also yours, so why don't you bring me? Isn't it still famous now? It's not low-key or authentic, and it's hard to get through this without a 300 or 500 gin galleon. After Seal finished speaking, he went to bed very rascally, looking at Dumbledore as if you did something inappropriate. The countless words Dumbledore had prepared were all given by Ciel's words. Pushing it back, especially Ciel's last sentence without 300 or 500 galleons, made Dumbledore feel that his blood pressure was gradually rising. Vaguely, Dumbledore seemed to see a man carrying a long knife and wearing ancient oriental costumes, looking at him with a grim expression, and gritted his teeth and spit out a sentence to add money. Angrily, he glanced at the rogue Ciel. Dumbledore swore to kill him and never thought that Ciel would saltfish to such an extent. He originally thought that Ciel would be unhappy, but he was a little unhappy in the end, but not happy that your name appeared in the newspaper. Looking at Ciel angrily, Dumbledore coughed helplessly, and then said, "Then you can stay here. Anyway, it's not good for you to appear in the magic world only once these days, it's better to continue. This opportunity is honestly here to consolidate itself." Quote. After he finished speaking, Dumbledore stood up, clapped his hands, and disappeared into Ciel's room with a phoenix cry, but Ciel was still thinking of making a fool of himself, and he would have to add money to him. 300 to 500 gold cannons are blooming, and the whole thing is that Loudang actually lifts the table. As for his own merits being falsely claimed to do something, Ciel sincerely hopes that his name will not appear in the newspapers, not to mention those reporters in the magic world who can make people mad, and say that Ciel himself is a believer in as long as you can enter the village, you don't want to shoot. However, this time, old Dunshire was still a little unwilling to do so. The most important thing is that at this time, Ciel was full of Hermione. How could he have the leisure to consolidate himself? Isn't it sweet to hold a lowly? Besides, where consolidating is not consolidating, Charles felt that the Weasley family's burrow was actually quite good. After seeing Dumbledore's departure, Charles immediately became cautious. After waiting for a while, after confirming that Loudang would never kill a carbine or something, Ciel jumped out of bed excitedly, and arcs began to flash continuously on his body. Charles Flow, Transfiguration Film Version, Target Burrow, Activate. Ciel chanted the very second line, and even put on a very second pause, and then launched his own original version without hesitation of apparition. Chapter 288-Char forced to shut down. With a flash of lightning, Ciel turned into a thunder and disappeared in the original place, but what Ciel didn't expect was that after only a few seconds in the originally empty room, he thought of it again for a while. Thunder crackling sound. Accompanied by Li Guang, there is also a confused Ciel. Ciel looked at the familiar environment around him in a dazed way. If Ciel was blinded to death, Ciel was sure that this was definitely the room he had just now, and he didn't even change his location. After carefully feeling the magic that he activated, Ciel confirmed one thing, and that is that his magic was definitely successfully activated. It stands to reason that the magic just now will definitely carry Ciel across a distance of thousands of miles in an instant. Although it is essentially the incarnation of thunder and lightning to travel at the speed of light, it is different from the space magic-like apparition in the true sense, but that is the speed of light, no matter what, it will not let Ciel just jump in place. Is it the wrong posture? This thought suddenly popped up in Ciel's mind. Even though he knew that such an idea was nonsense, Ciel couldn't stop the thought. In the end, Ciel decided to give up thinking and follow his instincts. After all, magic is an idealistic thing, not to mention that there is no one else around except Ciel himself. After giving up thinking, Ciel followed his heart and began to try all kinds of poses, even a lot of shameful poses, but no matter what kind of poses, they failed without exception. Apart from the fact that the floor under his feet became slightly charred after Ciel's attempts, the result of all attempts was the same. That is, Seal couldn't leave the place no matter how hard he tried. Just as Seal continued to assume a posture that was almost beyond the limits of the human body and was about to make his 23rd attempt, a fireball suddenly appeared in front of Seal. The sudden change startled Shah-Ur, and Shah-Ur hurriedly touched the shameful posture and climbed up from the ground, staring blankly at the fireball in front of him. Before Seal could take a closer look at where the fireball came from, the fireball seemed to find that Seal was staring at him, and then began to deform continuously. It began to elongate and square, and gradually turned into a rectangular flame window. Seal didn't understand what was going on, so he could only stare blankly at the changes in front of him. As for the danger. If you are going to die on Lao Deng's sight and encounter any danger, then Lao Deng should just kill himself, and let him do whatever Voldemort does, because he can't beat it anyway. After a while, the phantom that turned into a rectangle spit out a piece of paper very quickly, and then quickly disappeared in front of Seal. Seal was still a little unresponsive, and looked at the paper that fell on the ground strangely. With great curiosity, Seal finally decided to pick up the paper and see what was written on it. Stepping forward cautiously, Seal used magic very carefully to make the note float in front of him and began to read. I tried many times to leave, right? But it's a pity, I can't do it, right? Seal, don't underestimate the development of more than 5,000 years. Countless wizards have made the magic has undergone earth-shaking changes, and one of them is the magic of space. The space-based protection spell used in this room was something that would never have existed before, so stay here with peace of mind. There was also a bee with a cheap smile on the inscription on the note. For some reason, Charles automatically brought the cheap smile on the bee's face to Dumbledore's face. Mommy faker. After another very classic scolding, Seal threw the note to the ground heavily, and as if remembering something, Seal picked it up again carefully. Cursingly, he walked out of the door of the room and into the living room. Seal found the most conspicuous place. After a gesture to determine the location, Seal did not hesitate to stick the damn note on the most conspicuous place in the living room. Conspicuous place. Don't even forget to put a few permanent fixation spells on a note. After doing all of this, Seal looked at the structure of the entire room, and began to wander around the room continuously. He couldn't leave the house, not to mention that he couldn't leave outside the house. Can a living person be choked to death by urine? Seal feels that he is unusually witty. But soon, Seal felt as if he was about to suffocate when he was urinating. The flag really couldn't stand up casually. There was no other reason, because Seal walked through the whole house and didn't find any way to the outside, let alone the door, not even a single window. The whole house only had the bedroom where Charles was lying, a bathroom with a huge bathtub, a study with many books, a toilet, a kitchen, and the living room where Charles had just fixed Dumbledore's dark history. The most amazing thing for Seal is that the whole house has no windows, but it is extremely bright. Even standing in the room, you can clearly perceive the sunlight and time you want, as if the sun shines through the walls. Same. Finding that he couldn't live without him, Shah-Ur had no choice but to temporarily let go of his thoughts about Hermione, and walked to the kitchen cursingly to comfort his stomach that had been protesting for a long time. Fortunately, there was still a refrigerator in the kitchen, and a lot of fresh food was carefully prepared in the refrigerator, which made Charles feel relieved. At least he didn't have to worry that he would die of starvation in this Dumbledore's caring place. It is in the blessed retreat, prepared for myself. Wait, isn't this the anti-Charles prison that your teacher built to guard against him? Seal was thinking wildly while cooking, and even Seal had begun to wonder if Dumbledore had begun to have a genetic disease called the anti-everything Stark family. After a simple meal, when Seal passed by the living room, he saw the note posted in the most prominent place in the living room again. Seal cursed again and added dozens of permanent fixation techniques to the note, and added a dynamic special effect to the cheap bee. As long as someone approached within 1 meter of the note, the bee would die. There will be a smirk in Dumbledore's voice. After doing all this, Shah-Ur looked at his achievements with satisfaction, and then clapped his hands contentedly and prepared to take a good bath in the luxurious bath, and then went to see what books were in the study. Anyway, he has been forced to retreat, and Seal doesn't mind improving himself more when no one is bothering him. Just like what Dumbledore said, consolidate himself well. After all, it is only a space-based magic. Confining himself, Seal knew that he still had many shortcomings. On the side of Seal, he started his own retreat in a leisurely manner, but the whole outside world was still not so calm, and it could even be said that it was a stormy sea. Chapter 289 Whirlpool of Public Opinion. Fudge feels that his life has been too bad recently, it can even be said that it is terrible, and the Daily Prophet seems to have gone crazy and began to constantly hold the Ministry of Magic responsible for its dereliction of duty. This situation even intensified when Fuji reacted and wanted to introduce another thing according to the previous routine to divert the public's attention. Fuji discovered that the tried and true trick actually failed at this time. Sitting in the office, Fudge looked at the front page headline of the Daily Prophet, which was an exclusive interview with Dumbledore, where Dumbledore smiled and explained the magic used on the field. As for the topic of the stone giant at the beginning of Seal, Dumbledore was fooled by Dumbledore's words like transfiguration. After all, as the previous transfiguration professor, his disciple just deformed a rough giant busts and the like are still excusable. As for what Dumbledore said, in addition to ordinary people, whether the pure-blooded nobles believe it or not is another matter. Even at the end of the entire article, Dumbledore gave detailed questions about the dereliction of duty by the Ministry of Magic asked by reporters. Answer. Although Dumbledore was very sincere when he said that no one is a saint or a saint, this is completely ironic, even ironic, in Fudge's view. Especially when until now, neither the Ministry of Magic nor some other people have been able to find the protagonist Seal who tried his best. Not to mention Seal, even Seal's Muggle parents, the Ministry of Magic were very blind and said that they had lost their whereabouts. Thanks to Dumbledore's magic, Seal and the Granger family seem to be lost from the wizarding world. Once erased, it's hard for anyone to find. The news that his subordinates kept coming together made Fuji furious, and even smashed the office 2 or 3 times. As for the news that was originally intended to divert public attention, that is, the Ministry of Magic and the officials of the Quidditch World Cup once again organized the final and the Bulgarian team won the news, which was stuffed into an inconspicuous corner of the newspaper by the Daily Prophet. I didn't even have a photo. Fuji, who found all this, smashed his office to a pulp again and again in a rage. Fortunately, all the damage in the magical world can be fixed by restoring it, but the secretary is sitting in the office. Secretary outside. Listening to the jingling sound in Fuji's office, the secretary could only bow his head cautiously, lest he would lose his job due to Fuji's anger. The people are indifferent to everything that happens at the Ministry of Magic. As for what they care about recently, how high has the seal reached? How high did Dumbledore reach? What happened on the field that night? These 3 points are the talk of almost every wizard walking on the street after dinner, and there are even sects. Seal, who is in retreat, can't think of it, and he has a group of die-hard fans because of such an incident. Even this group of die-hard fans continued to give Seal nicknames behind their backs, such as Little Dumbledore and the like divided according to the master-disciple flow, and the Flame Monarch, the Son of the Earth and the like divided according to Magic's secondary nickname. CP for Seal and Dumbledore, and who called Seal Little Grindelwald. Well, this group must be the rotten female audience who read Dumbledore's gossip back then. Of course, in addition to these people who take all this as a talk, there are also a small number of people who are also worried about the impact of Shire, and the one who feels the most headache is Dumbledore. As for the reason is very simple, Triwizard Tournament. Despite what happened at the Quidditch World Cup, the Ministry of Magic was trying its best to push the Triwizard Tournament, and after the news of the World Cup final restart diverted its plans to fail, the Ministry of Magic put all its hopes in its Triwizard Tournament. It's just that compared to the officials of the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore is more troublesome at this time. There is no other reason. Just this morning, Dumbledore received a letter from Mrs. Maxime and Karkaroff asking for another meeting. In desperation, Dumbledore could only snatch the venue, but what Dumbledore did not expect was that the main purpose of this meeting was not to change the venue. The focus of the entire meeting was on one person, that is Shaw. According to Mrs. Maxime's words, the Triwizard Tournament was resolutely prevented from taking part in the Triwizard Tournament. After all, according to Charlie's performance in the Quidditch World Cup, there was no need for the Triwizard Tournament to be held. After all, not everyone is a Cyclops, and they can resist even an old punch of the Transfiguration like the seal mentioned in the news. However, Karkaroff doesn't seem to be interested in this, and even has time to taunt a wave of Bo Barton's cowardice. Helpless, Madame Maxime was resolute, and she couldn't let Seal compete even if she was bitten to death. After the last three quarreled, and Karkaroff fanned the flames, they each took a step back, and then they reached an agreement. The first point is that Seal has not reached the age to participate at all, so he is not qualified to participate in the competition, but according to the magic currently mastered by Seal, it is not ruled out that Seal can crack the age line set by the Triwizard hegemony. In order to appease Madame Maxime's anger, Dumbledore finally made some concessions. First of all, Madame Maxime no longer explicitly prevented Charles from participating in the competition, but on the contrary, the age line that originally determined the age of the contestants will be divided by 3. The principals of the schools are arranged separately. Even for the sake of insurance, Madame Maxime asked the Ministry of Magic to also participate. In other words, the age limit for students to be naughty and mischievous in a house arranged by Dumbledore has now become 4. After reaching such a result, Madame Maxime left with satisfaction, and was ready to go back and check her own library. She had to arrange it well, so that there was no possibility for that Seal to participate in the competition. As for Dumbledore, I took the time to find Seal. After learning that Seal was still interested in the Triwizard Tournament, because of everything that happened in the Quidditch World Cup, Seal expressed that he still wanted to play in the dog. After a wave, Dumbledore also said that it didn't matter. As for the planned resurrection of Voldemort, Seal said it would be impossible to get the next coordinate on Harry's unlucky bastard. As long as Harry disappears, he immediately asks Fawkes to follow him with him. Seal is absolutely confident to save the original Twilight Man. As for things like the game, Seal, who is still thinking of killing a wave of dragons and pretending to be a coward, should dismiss it. This idea. All I can say is to enjoy the last quiet semester before Voldemort's return. If you start next year, you will definitely have to face the noseless starter. This is a feud and must be resolved. Chapter 290_Shire. Seal has been feeling really bad lately for no other reason than this damned place with no windows or doors, constantly synchronizing with the weather outside the house. This also directly leads to an indisputable fact. As we all know, in summer, the nights are always shorter and the days are longer. This also leads to the fact that every time Charles wants to sleep in, he will be awakened by the sun every morning. It was fine at the beginning, but after a long time, Seal's character that I don't sleep if I don't sleep on the moon has been adjusted to the level of going to bed early and getting up early by this damn sunroom. Another point is that Seal felt bored, and it was fine at first. After all, he was an otaku in his last life. The habit engraved in his DNA made Seal not so boring at first, not to mention for Seal, who likes to take a bath. The huge and luxurious bath in the house is simply my favorite. But it couldn't hold up for a long time, and the most important thing is that there is no network and mobile phone as convenient as in the previous life. After only enjoying a few days, Seal has already started to miss all the equipment in the previous life, and he has been sighing with emotion for a whole day. The backwardness of the world doesn't even have a damn radio. If a person is bored, then absolutely anything can be done. The bored Seal put his eyes on the huge study. In just a few short days, Seal had already read several stinky and long books on magic theory, and even based on the knowledge in the books, he discovered a lot of his own shortcomings, especially Transfiguration. As far as Transfiguration is concerned, if Seal's original knowledge of transfiguration has just reached the level of Hogwarts graduation, then the current theoretical knowledge of Seal's transfiguration can definitely beat his original self. Even after a long time, Seal found a lot of strange magic books in Dumbledore's collection, and even one of them was about the sky magic above the Hogwarts auditorium. This discovery made Seal happy to lose weight, and he couldn't be happier. Anyway, it was able to block the damn sunshine. Since Seal discovered and learned this magic, every morning, he would find that Seal's house was covered with dark clouds, whether the ceiling or the walls were covered with thick dark clouds. Even the floor was covered with thick dark clouds to block the sun. So miscellaneous, this magic is just a simple phantom. Otherwise, the dark cloud covering the whole room alone can make Seal feel a wave of what is called dampness. Even just a few days later, Seal became extremely proficient in practicing this magic. Thanks to the change in the process of his spellcasting, Seal even made a little change to this spell. One day early in the morning, when Dumbledore and Fawkes appeared in Seal's room, the first thing Dumbledore saw was not Seal sleeping on the bed, but a man sleeping on the bed. Dark clouds. Even Dumbledore, who had seen countless strange things, couldn't help being stunned for a long time in such a strange situation, and even took out his wand with great interest to study it. However, Dumbledore's research was interrupted before long, and the reason was very simple: Seal woke up. When Seal sat up from the dark cloud in a daze, the first thing he saw was Dumbledore clutching the Elder Wand and looking curiously at his bed with an unknown magic. Hill's sudden rise also startled Dumbledore. Although he knew that the guy sleeping in the dark cloud was his apprentice, no one thought that Seal would wake up at this time. For a while, both of them fell into an embarrassing state. Only Dumbledore's Elder Wand still exuded a soft light, constantly wrapping the dark clouds on Shire's bed. "Teacher, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in teacher-student romance." With a hint of embarrassment on his face, Seal spit out these words without thinking. It was not until after he finished speaking that Seal realized what he had said. For a while, the embarrassed look on Seal's face became more intense. Fortunately, Dumbledore had seen all kinds of wind and waves in his life. Lucy's thoughts, pretended to be very serious and coughed twice, and then explained to Seal what he wanted to do just now. After hearing Dumbledore's statement, Seal, who was originally boring, was very proud to tell Dumbledore about his experience in improving this spell. In this way, the master and the apprentice kept experimenting with the Char's improved spell in the Seal room. If it is to be experienced, it has to be Dumbledore. In just a short time, Dumbledore has once again improved Seal's spell, and even said that the effect is much stronger than Seal. Originally just a phantom magic that changed the ceiling, in Seal's hands it may have been a simple dark cloud blocking the light, but in Dumbledore's hands, it turned into a darkness that filled the whole room almost instantly. The fog can even reach the level of indistinguishable between people and animals 1 meter away. The only problem is that when this magic is used, he can't see the enemy. After everything last night, Dumbledore waved his wand contentedly to disperse the fog, and said contentedly that there was room for improvement in this magic. Once this magic improvement is completed, it will definitely be a good player at interfering with the enemy's vision magic, and even because it was originally a phantom, even the possibility of wanting to blow this magic away has been directly eliminated. Hearing that, Charles was stunned for a moment. It was only after Dumbledore explained the use of this magic and the direction of improvement that Charles realized that Dumbledore was looking for him early in the morning for what? Listening to Seal's question, Dumbledore finally realized what he was doing here. He was so addicted to magic that he suddenly forgot his business. Dumbledore hurriedly put away his wand, and then looked at Seal and said slowly, "I'm sorry, Seal, I forgot my business." Seal didn't take Dumbledore's words to heart, but slowly put a question mark in his head, and Dumbledore continued to say after seeing that Seal had obtained his appearance. "Looks like you haven't calculated the time these days, Seal. Today is the start of school." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal came to his senses. It seems like school is about to start. Seeing Seal jumping up and down, looking impatient, Dumbledore smiled and continued, Don't worry, I'll ask Granger to help you buy all the things you need for next semester. It's over, now all you have to do is go straight to the train station. Just after Dumbledore said this, as if he had remembered something, he actually took out a Muggle pocket watch from his arms and opened it, and then said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Charles. It looks like you'll have to go straight to the train." Chapter 291-Dumbledore's Room of Requirement. After Dumbledore finished speaking, he walked to the bedroom, in front of a small desk that Seal had never touched. Dumbledore's actions obviously attracted Seal's attention, and Seal, who didn't know what Dumbledore was doing, also stared blankly at Dumbledore's operations. I saw Dumbledore walk to the front of the desk, pulled away the chair that Seal hadn't moved at all, and then casually opened the large drawer under the desk. Dumbledore, who was doing everything last night, turned to look at Seal. "Are you ready? If you are ready, we will leave." It was only then that Seal came to his senses. He stared blankly at the desk that Dumbledore had pulled over. The corners of his mouth twitched constantly. With a tone of doubt about life, he asked the question in his heart. "Teacher, tell me the truth honestly, shouldn't this damn drawer be the exit? Also, do you know a blue fat guy who looks like a civet cat?" Seeing that Seal was a little suspicious of everyone's life, Dumbledore looked at Seal with a smile. "This is the exit, I thought you would find out. As for the blue one you mentioned, it looks like a civet cat. Is the fat man called Doraemon? To be honest, where did this idea come from? A few years ago, a friend from a country where I lived a good life sent me a few copies. He said that he painted some magic in a way that was acceptable to Muggles, and it was very popular in the Muggle world, so it also sent me a lot of mailings on purpose. I really saw it. It looks very interesting, doesn't it?" As Dumbledore's voice fell, Seal felt as if he had crossed again for a while, and he didn't respond to what Dumbledore said for a while. But then a huge sense of shame directly made Seal break the defense. Good guy, after looking for the entrance and exit for a whole day, TMD in front of him. Looking at Dumbledore standing by the desk with a mischievous smile, Charles almost gritted his back molars before slowly asking, "Then, teacher, can you tell me why you always want Fawkes to bring you in?" Dumbledore listened to Seal's words, and the smile on his face became even brighter. He looked at his apprentice Seal with a smug look, and then said proudly, "Because Fawkes is more convenient, you were right. Bar Fawkes." Listening to Dumbledore's words, Seal felt as if he was the stupidest idiot in the world for a while, and at the same time he was constantly complaining about his teacher. Good guy, he really deserves to be a player from Gryffindor. No, it should be said that the guys from Gryffindor are not without a trace of bad taste, even including themselves. Just as Seal turned around and wanted to see Fawkes, who was still sitting on the chair beside Seal's bed, he asked Fawkes if he would abandon this old guy with more and more wicked tastes to follow him, in order to counter a wave of his own. When the teacher. Before Seal could speak, Seal felt that his young mind was once again hit by a 10,000-ton crit. The reason was very simple. Before Seal's ridicule could be said, Seal saw Fawkes's bird face. Also full of mischievous successful smiles. Now one is his teacher and the other is his teacher's bird. One person and one bird exchanged a prank smile under Seal's eyes. Seeing that Seal was really a three-corpse god, he threw the sentence viciously, and after a while, Seal ran into Dumbledore's study, and took a lot of money like a robbery without any politeness. Magic book. Thank you for the shrinking curse of the wizarding world. Otherwise, you won't be able to take away much of these tomes, and Dumbledore obviously doesn't care about Seal's behavior. As for the reason, it's very simple. These books are written for Seal. What was prepared, even if Seal didn't take it away, Dumbledore would find an opportunity to send it to Seal later. After Seal returned to the room, Dumbledore looked at Seal with a smile. "Are you ready?" Seal ignored Dumbledore, and after giving his teacher a blank eye, he stepped into the drawer above the table. Then Seal regretted it, extremely regretful. Originally, what Seal thought was that at best this drawer would look like the damn toilet bowl when the Ministry of Magic went to work, and at worst it would look like his own little box with stairs inside. What I never expected was that this drawer turned out to be a tunnel like a bottomless pit. After Seal stomped his feet, his head slammed heavily on the edge of the desk, and then he started to free fall. Seal swore that he was about to free fall for nearly 10 minutes, and then slowly saw a small hole shining white light appeared under his feet. As Seal approached, the original small hole became bigger and bigger, until it was about to approach the hole. Seal discovered that the picture displayed at the entrance of the hole made Seal extremely familiar. It was Hogwarts, principal's office. When Seal fell on the hole, it was as if he had hit a soft membrane, helping Seal to slow down continuously, and finally reaching a height of half a meter from the ground, the membrane suddenly burst and threw Seal to the ground. On the ground. When Seal recovered from the fear of free fall and got up, he realized that Dumbledore was already sitting on the chair in his headmaster's office, and even Fawkes was on his golden shelf. One person and one bird looked at the embarrassed Seal with a smile in their eyes. Almost in an instant, Seal understood what it means to feel tired and not loving, and he had a deep understanding of it. Seeing Seal looking tired, Dumbledore smiled and invited Seal to sit down, and then continued, "Well, this is the house of requirement I made by imitating Lady Ravenclaw. Not to the level of Lady Ravenclaw, but it can conjure up the luxury bath you want. But it can only be like that. The shape that can be changed is relatively limited, and the size of the room can only be limited to a fixed level. As for the body of the room, unfortunately, according to my current ability, I can't reach the level of directly using a classroom like Ms. Ravenclaw, so I can only settle for the next best thing." After he finished speaking, Dumbledore didn't forget to point to a suitcase of the same style as Seal on the shelf, and then looked at Seal with a smile, as if waiting for Seal's compliments. But Seal didn't notice Dumbledore's expression at all, just asked dumbly, "So, I've been at school these days?" Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore still smiled and nodded, and before Dumbledore could continue to speak, Seal said angrily, "Then I also went to the train for left, and went directly to the auditorium." After finishing speaking, Seal stood up and prepared to leave, talking to himself. The very injured Seal really didn't want to pay attention to this old urchin like Dumbledore at this time. It's just that Seal hadn't walked a few steps when Dumbledore's voice came from behind him. "I'm sorry, Seal, I think no matter what it is, it's still a Hogwarts tradition for the author to come to school by train, isn't it?" As Dumbledore's voice fell, before Seal turned to refute, Seal felt that something had fallen on top of his head, and then before Seal could react, a fiery red flame was in front of Seal's eyes. Covered in flames. Chapter 292 Discussion on the train. By the time the flames in front of Seal disappeared, Seal had already entered the moving train. At this time, the train had already left the urban area of London, and there were lush grass outside the window. Fawkes didn't give Seal a chance to react. He disappeared above Seal's head almost as soon as Seal appeared on the train. Before Seal could react, he felt that he was being embraced by a warm embrace. The familiar smell made Seal immediately realize that this person was Hermione. Seal, who had not seen Hermione for a long time, suddenly felt that all the thoughts of the past few days had emerged uncontrollably, almost subconsciously. He hugged the girl in his arms. On this side, Seal and Hermione were hugging excitedly, but Ron, who was sitting next to Harry, felt as if he had discovered something. The flames that appeared suddenly startled Ron. Min's unusual behavior also made Ron, who stood up and wanted to hug his friend, embarrassed. Looking at Hermione and Seal, Ron could only helplessly sit down again, and at the same time he didn't forget to poke Harry next to him, wanting to share a wave of his conjectures. Seal and Hermione definitely is in love. What Ron didn't expect was that Harry would definitely respond to him as usual, but this time when he whispered his thoughts beside Harry, he didn't get any response. This surprised Ron's game, and immediately turned his head to look at Harry for some unknown reason, but Harry's state once again made Ron fall into a life of doubt. At this time, Harry seemed to be possessed by something. With a demented smile, his eyes silently looking at the scenery outside the window, and occasionally he would let out a little giggle. Harry's performance shocked Ron, and also attracted Hermione and Seal, who had just finished their sweet hug. At the end of Seal and Hermione sitting down again, Ron was greeted immediately. Doubtful look. Looking at Harry's appearance, Seal immediately reacted to his compatriot. In desperation, he could only use his mouth to tell Ron, who was still doubting his life, to leave it alone. Although Ron was still a little puzzled, at this time Ron was obviously more interested in the fight with Seal at the Quidditch World Cup that night. After Seal sat down, he began to continuously ask about what happened to Seal at that time. Seal knew that the person in front of him was famous for his big mouth, and without thinking about it, he told Ron exactly what happened at that time according to Dumbledore's arrangement. Anyway, he tried to weaken his existence as much as possible. But even this made Ron amazed again and again, but Hermione just sat aside with a smile and quietly looked at the book in her hand. As one of the few insiders, Hermione didn't care what Seal said. Being too famous is not a good thing, especially when everyone can find you. Under Seal's conscious or unintentional guidance, Ron's experience finally changed from the battle at the Quidditch World Cup to being curious about the Triwizard Tournament. Unlike the original book, this time under the operation of the Gold Cup, the Ministry of Magic had to release the news of the Triwizard Tournament in advance in order to divert the attention of the public. This also indirectly caused the attention of all Hogwarts little wizards to quickly change from the shocking battle to their expectations for the next semester. But things often have two sides. Although the whole train car is discussing the Triwizard Tournament, the news that Seal came to the train is still spreading rapidly throughout the train. It was only after a while that the discussion between Seal, Ron and Hermione had to be suspended. The reason was very simple. There were a lot of little wizards gathered outside the box for several people, most of them from the lower grades. Little wizard. All the little wizards were very curious about what this apprentice of Headmaster Dumbledore, the so-called second Dumbledore Senior, was like. Seeing that the number of people was increasing, and even the appearance of the prefect to maintain order was useless, Seal could only helplessly open the door of the box and walked out. After a series of autographed and group photos for the purpose of chasing stars, Shaur returned to the box of the train extremely tired. At this time, Shaur felt free, that he never went out today without looking at the almanac. On the contrary, Ron, who had been sitting in the box, looked at Seal with a slightly different look, and asked Seal with a trace of jealousy in his eyes. "How does it feel to be a big celebrity?" Seal didn't care about the change in Ron's eyes, and answered Ron's question very seriously from the bottom of his heart. "Seriously, it's not good at all. I really don't want to experience something like this again." While talking, Charles rubbed the hand he signed just now. God knows how many names he signed and how many photos he just took. His smiling face was a little stiff. At this time, Charles felt that he was starting to admire Lockhart. How did he manage to be so content with these things? Charles just felt tired, even more tiring than a fight with Voldemort. Looking at Seal's expression as if he was about to be played, the fire of jealousy in Ron's heart suddenly dissipated for some reason, and he was even a little glad that he was not Seal. "It's broken, what if you were yourself?" Vanguard Ron couldn't help shivering, looking at Seal with a pitiful look in his eyes. "Are you all right, Seal?" At this time, Seal was rubbing his wrists distressed by Hermione. Hearing Ron's words, Seal's face instantly turned black like the bottom of a pot, and answered Ron's question with a deep look. "No, it's a big deal, and now I feel like my muscles are going to go stiff." Seal's answer made Hermione more distressed, and he couldn't help rubbing Seal's wrist a little harder. Ron also clearly found out what Seal's purpose was. Ron, who was stuffed with a wolf, gave Seal a huge white eye, then turned around and sat down and ignored Seal. On the contrary, Seal gave Ron a thumbs up secretly, in exchange for a big white eye from Ron again. Of course, this atmosphere didn't last long, and several people fell into the discussion about the Triwizard Tournament again. Even with Ron, after hearing that Shire and Hermione went to Beauxbatons, they also fell into this foreign magic school. Out of curiosity, he kept asking Shire and Hermione whether everything about Beauxbatons was really as good as the legends said. As for Harry, that poor child was trapped in Zhongchu's beauty all day long, and when the train arrived at the station, he felt what Charles said, and it was estimated that Harry would have been buried there with Jiangchu after he died. Think about it. Chapter 293 _ The surprise at the opening dinner. The sound of the three's discussion was quickly covered by the sound of the train's whistle. After the three of them finished their discussion about the Triwizard Tournament again, Seal realized that it was already dark. I hurriedly urged everyone to change into school uniforms. After all, according to tradition, Hogwarts robes must be on the bed at the opening dinner. As for Harry, he was also supported by Seal and Ron, who put the robe on Harry's body indiscriminately. It was only at this time that Harry reacted with a confused look in his eyes. Watching hungry Shire and Ron. Arriving at school, so soon, where's Hermione? Hearing Harry's 3 consecutive stuns, Seal and Ron rolled their eyes in unison, expressing that they didn't want to pay attention to Harry, a big injustice in his puberty, but Harry himself, after seeing their unusually neat white eyes, he also realized how stupid his question just now was, and couldn't help but smile awkwardly. At this time, Ron leaned over to Harry with a mean smile and looked at Harry. Harry, what kind of beautiful girl can make you look like this? You're more exaggerated than seeing Avila. Ron's words successfully made Harry a big red face, hesitating and not knowing how to answer Ron's question. Seal looked at the 2 people who were funny and couldn't help but rolled his eyes again. After knowing the plot, Seal couldn't understand too much. Who else could it be? Zhang Chubai, but there is one thing to say. Harry's appearance really made him curious about which legendary Harry's first love and what his fellow countryman was like. Don't ask why Seal is in 4th grade and still doesn't know what such a key plot character looks like. You have to know that Hogwarts is too big, not to mention that this is still a senior girl. If you want to go with Slytherin, Charles, who stayed in the principal's room during class, would never have the heart to think about it and visit this fellow. Fortunately, before Ron's flames about gossip burned on Seal, Hermione had already changed clothes from Ciel's small box and walked out. It was also a coincidence that Hermione had just stepped out, and the train had begun to slow down slowly, and the scenery outside the window had begun to show the appearance of Hogsmeade. In a short while, the train slowly stopped on the platform, and Seal quickly took Hermione's hand and greeted Harry and Ron to follow. A better carriage, otherwise a few people might split the sockets into other people's carriages. Harry heard Ciel's call and hurriedly followed. Ron's fire of gossip Harry could only say that it was too hard to withstand. It's just that what Harry, Ron, and even Hermione didn't expect was that just after they got out of the train, they instantly became the focus of the little wizards who had gotten off the train. Especially some female pure-blood wizards. The look in Ciel's eyes can be called terrifying, and even Ciel has begun to doubt that if he hadn't held Hermione's hand and stood here alone, the pure-blooded witches of Slytherin will definitely come. Hermione also quickly discovered this, and after glancing around with bad eyes, she pulled Ciel's hand even tighter, even leaning against Ciel's body unconsciously. Seeing that more and more people got out of the car, and even many young wizards from the lower grades looked at this with curious eyes, Ciel's forehead shuddered involuntarily, and he pulled Hermione without hesitation. Greeted Harry and ran to the carriage at almost the same speed as running away. Fortunately, after Ciel left quickly, there was no confusion, but Hagrid, who was standing at the front of the car, shrugged helplessly, and smiled involuntarily as the 4 of them left the platform as if they were fleeing for their lives. Just continue to say hello to this year's Shoutooting. The carriage was still the same as before, smoothly and quietly, and sent the 4 to the gate of the school. Professor McGonagall was standing at the gate at this time, preparing to welcome the new students. After Ciel and the others greeted Professor McGonagall honestly, they honestly entered the auditorium and found an inconspicuous place to sit and wait for the banquet to start. What Ciel didn't expect was that the 4 of them had just entered the auditorium, and the originally gloomy weather outside began to drizzle randomly, and gradually it increased. Looking out the window, it was raining heavily, and the 4 of them started to feel fortunate that they were able to run faster. Just a short while later, people began to enter the entire auditorium. Thanks to this sudden heavy rain, many people had to start to deal with their wet clothes, but no one cared about Charles sitting in the corner. Charles couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. In less than half an hour, the entire auditorium was already full of little wizards, and apart from the freshmen who had not arrived, only the professor was not there. Just as Seal looked at the empty teacher's chair, thinking about the fucking thing that he had left and returned to Hogwarts this morning, he planned how to fuck him after the banquet was over. When the door of the hut next to the teacher's bench opened at once, with Dumbledore taking the lead, the teachers entered the teacher's bench in an orderly manner and waited for this year's freshmen. The teachers just finished their work, and a person on the teacher's bench immediately caught Seal's attention, and even to make sure, Seal specially felt a wave of magic and elements on the teacher's bench. After several examinations, Seal dared to be 100% sure that the guy who was sitting not far from Dumbledore was chatting with Dean Ravenclaw very happily, and looked like this year's defense against the dark arts teacher. Definitely his other teacher Grindelwald. Even if you look closely, you will find that Grindelwald didn't even change his appearance, but simply changed his beautiful long black hair, and gave the abnormally colored pupils to the pair of abnormal signs. It just turned black. Even his own huge magic power and the power of elements like the blazing sun did not converge a little. The most important thing is that basically everyone in the teacher's chair where this guy returned him can have a good conversation. Now Green Dever had started talking to Snape incessantly. Looking at what happened on the teacher's chair, Seal felt that the Triwizard Tournament would be very lively if there were no accidents. The original Moody did not know where he went, and he became a generation of Dark Lord Grindelwald. The most nonsense is if nothing else, the Dark Lord would even teach defense against the dark arts. It's okay for me to teach everyone to defend myself, but for a while, Seal felt that he had too many grooves and didn't know how to talk. It just didn't take long for Seal to turn around in an instant, and it seemed that he would also go to Grindelwald's class. Thinking back to my summer vacation in Nurmengard, I don't know why, a premonition that was not very good suddenly came up from the bottom of Seal's heart. Chapter 294 Dinner and Speech. Seal can only say that this time the separation ceremony was very unpleasant. He didn't have the mood to actively participate in the heated discussions in previous years, and he didn't even bother to participate in the small betting games that the twins had opened over the years. As for the reason, it is very simple. After Seal discovered a Dark Lord who had swept Europe by storm, and taught himself a summer vacation, even after the summer vacation ended, he was able to make himself a little stressed. There is always a feeling that a treachery wants to harm me, and it has always been entrenched in Seal's heart. This also directly led to Seal not paying attention to the sorting ceremony, and thinking about what his teacher Dumbledore wanted to do. Although Seal did not pay attention to the sorting ceremony was completed normally, and even Moody who walked in after the sorting ceremony in the original book did not appear. The two good friends, Dumbledore and Grindelwald, watched the sorting ceremony with a smile, as if they didn't know each other's identities. Finally, after the last little wizard was assigned to Slytherin, Dumbledore stood up and walked behind the headmaster's exclusive owl shelf. The little wizards present calmed down when they saw Dumbledore stand up. Everyone looked at Dumbledore with curious eyes, as if they were waiting for his declaration. However, Loudang didn't seem to follow their ideas. He looked at everyone with a smile, stood up and looked at everyone with a mischievous look in his eyes. Welcome everyone to Hogwarts. I think you must have seen from the newspapers that there is a big event at Hogwarts this year. But, I think whether you are a freshman or an old man, you should be hungry at this moment, so, now, start eating. After Dumbledore finished speaking, a lot of food suddenly appeared on the tables of the 4 academies, and even different from previous years, this time there was a lot of different food on the table. Thanks to the fact that Shire mails a lot of recipes to the elves in the Hogwarts kitchen every year, but it reduces the number of times they go to the kitchen, these hard-working little guys spend a limited number of meetings in the end. Among them, a series of measurement units such as an appropriate amount have been settled. In the end, after everyone's election, an elf was elected and said when he delivered dinner to Dumbledore, which made the magical oriental dishes mastered by these elves appear in the opening dinner. The occasion. Relatively less concerned about the Tri-Wizard tournament, and full of thoughts about how to avoid being beaten up by another teacher in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, Seal, the other little wizards present, all sent out without exception. Dissatisfied voice. Dumbledore didn't care about the dissatisfaction of the little wizard at all. He just walked back with a mischievous smile, sat down with peace of mind and started to enjoy his dinner. Looking at Dumbledore's appearance, the little wizards couldn't say anything even if they were dissatisfied, but soon, this dissatisfaction was forgotten. The reason is very simple. New dishes that have appeared. That magical scent quickly dissipated all the little wizards' dissatisfaction with Dumbledore's mischievousness. After all, everyone had been on the train all day, all exhausted and hungry, and any interest at this time was beyond the reach of their eyes. Authentic food. Even Seal was immersed in it, showing that he had forgotten what he was worried about. It must be said that the craftsmanship of the elves was much better than that of Seal, which made Seal even feel like eating out in a previous life. After a meal of wind and clouds, Seal patted his stomach with satisfaction, feeling that this meal could be called the best meal since he came to Hogwarts. The only fly in the ointment may be that there is no bottle of happy water at this time. With a hint of anticipation, Charles tentatively tapped his empty plate with his finger, and then asked very tentatively, "Anything to drink?" As Seal's voice fell, a chilled bottle of Coke, which had just been opened, appeared in front of Seal's eyes. With quick eyes and quick hands, Seal didn't hesitate at all. He grabbed it and drank it clean. After drinking it, he didn't forget to burp. But Seal's operation obviously stunned the friends around him, and Ron was even more surprised to see Seal's operation, and then he wanted to learn the same way as Seal's operation. A bottle of magical soda from the Muggle world. But it is a pity that no matter what he did, the final result was a failure. In the end, under the pressure of Hermione and Harry's eyes, Seal brought a small bottle of Coke to the people around him in a small area. As for Ron's question about why he failed, Seal could only look at the ornament on his right hand, and answered Ron very unconscientiously, "Probably because your relationship with the kitchen is not so good." After the last dessert on the table disappeared, Dumbledore stood up again, tapped the cup in his hand, and interrupted the chattering discussion of the little wizards before continuing. "Okay, it looks like everyone has enough to eat and drink, so let me, the old man, talk about some topics that everyone wants to know. The first thing I want to tell you is that we are sorry that this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts class has not been able to find a teacher, so we have to suspend the offering of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class this year." As soon as Dumbledore's voice fell, the younger wizards cheered, and the seniors who were approaching the exam frowned and watched Dumbledore say nothing, sometimes a little dissatisfied. After wasting a lot of energy, Dumbledore stopped the cheers of the children in the lower grades, and then continued, "But considering that this is a very important course, I still ask mine good friend, but because of some well-known rumors, this old friend of mine has stated that he will definitely not be a teacher of Defense Against the Dark Arts." Before Dumbledore could finish his words, there was a deep laughter among the students in the audience. Indeed, being a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts was indeed a high-risk profession. Dumbledore ignored the suppressed laughter in the audience and continued, "After a heated discussion with my old friend, I made the difficult decision to let him start a new compulsory course, Defense Against the Dark Arts class, and in lieu of this semester's Defense Against the Dark Arts class, let's welcome our Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Mr. Johnny Depp." As Dumbledore's voice fell, Grindelwald, who had been sitting on the teacher's bench, stood up very gracefully and greeted everyone. Knowing that the little wizards in the audience turned around at this time, the seniors couldn't help but start cheering, but the students in the lower grades were once again unhappy with the naked eye. Chapter 285-Conversation in the Principal's Office. Looking at the expressions of the little wizards in the audience, the mischievous mood in Dumbledore's eyes grew even more, and he smiled and waited for everyone to discuss it for a while before raising his hand and pressing it down. After seeing everyone quiet down, Dumbledore then continued, "That's all I can say about the course. As for the course taught by Johnny, I think everyone feels good for themselves. After all, in the eyes of my old friend, the things in the textbook are far less memorable than the practice of picking up the wand by yourself. Quote. After Dumbledore finished speaking, the little wizards who were still a little low-hearted cheered again. After all, this teaching concept was experienced by Professor Lupin last year. It has to be said that, compared to the original experience in Defense Against the Dark Arts, Lupin left a deep impression on all the little wizards at Hogwarts in just 1 year. This time, the cheers were quite enthusiastic, and even Dumbledore used a lot of strength to stop the excited little wizards. Looking at the students who became quiet again, Dumbledore spoke again. Said. As for the second thing, I am sure most of you have read it in the newspapers, but in order to take care of the children who don't know it, I am here to announce it again. This year, we are here, Hogwarts, once again restarting an ancient event, the Triwizard Tournament. For a long time, because it was too dangerous, there were even a lot of victims, so this event has been suspended for a long time. But this year, thanks to the efforts of our Ministry of Magic, the event is back again. And the first one after the restart will be held at Hogwarts, which is tantamount to a very important honor. Dumbledore had to pause when he said this, because the cheers of the little wizards in the audience almost overwhelmed the sound of his speech, so Dumbledore had to stop again to maintain order. Finally, after everyone was quiet, Dumbledore continued, this also means one thing, you will see 2 other schools of magic in this ancient land, they are Bobaton's Magic School and Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The other 2 schools of wizardry are expected to arrive at Hogwarts in a week's time. Dumbledore lost his original smile when he said this, and he gradually became serious while kissing. Looking at the excited young wizards in the audience, he continued with a very stern tone. So, I hope that the Hogwarts students here must pay attention to themselves. In the eyes of the other 2 schools, each of you represents Hogwarts. As Dumbledore's voice fell, a look of honor appeared on the faces of the little wizards present, and even many Gryffindors looked at the direction of the same twins intentionally or unintentionally. As for the twins themselves, they didn't notice it, and were still very excitedly waiting for Dumbledore's next speech. Dumbledore didn't spend too long on such a thing, and then continued, I will announce the specific matters about the Triwizard Tournament after the 3 schools have arrived. For now, the only thing that can let you know. That is, each school will select one of the strongest students to compete. Quote. After Dumbledore's voice fell, all the students looked towards the kitchen and asked for 2 bottles of Coke secretly, and secretly distributed a bottle to Hermione, who was happy at this time in Shire. Seal was secretly drinking happily, and was constantly sighing that he still had such a convenient privilege, after he had obtained the approval of Hogwarts. The Coke bottle hidden under the table was thrown out. Some people looked around in a daze, and almost wrote a sentence on the confused face, why are you looking at me like this? Looking at Seal's appearance, I don't know why the little wizards at Hogwarts who were present had emotions in their hearts for no reason. How did this guy become so strong? Fortunately, Dumbledore discovered the state of the little wizard present in time, and quickly cleared his throat before continuing, in view of the danger of this game, I regret to inform you that this game will have an unusually strict age restrictions. Only young wizards who have reached the age of 17 will be allowed to participate in the competition. Quote. With Dumbledore's voice falling, Seal broke away from the state that everyone was paying attention to almost instantly, and the senior students couldn't help cheering. Only those familiar with Seal looked at Seal with regretful eyes, especially Harry, Ron and Hermione. The 3 of them all looked at Seal with their clothes and regretful eyes, as if Seal was affected by his age. It's a great pity that I can't participate in the Triwizard Tournament. Seal didn't say much about this. Originally, Seal didn't want to participate in anything, and the attraction of the Triwizard Tournament to Seal was only the 1,000 gold galleons. Next, Dumbledore talked about some commonplace things, such as the Forbidden Forest and other topics, and then entered the appalling school song part of the commonplace. The only thing that was different from what was expected was that when Seal happily sang the untuned school song in a disturbed tone, Grindelwald's voice appeared in Seal's ear and told Seal to come after the curfew. A trip to the principal's office. As for being caught under the curfew, it was completely out of the consideration of Seal and Grindelwald. If anyone who mastered the elements was caught at night, then Seal should have committed suicide as soon as possible. After going through a series of procedures, when everyone fell asleep, Seal appeared in the headmaster's room on time. At this time, Grindelwald was talking to Dumbledore in the headmaster's room. When Seal came in, he happened to see Grindelwald holding Fawkes and looking at Dumbledore, while Dumbledore looked at Grindelwald with a serious face, not knowing what happened to the two of them. Seal just felt embarrassed, and felt that he came at the wrong time. Looking at the atmosphere of the two, Seal asked with embarrassment, "Should I go back first? You resolve family conflicts first." Originally, Seal wanted to use this sentence to adjust the awkward atmosphere, but the two people involved obviously misinterpreted Seal's meaning immediately. This night, except for Seal's roommate who knew that Seal hadn't returned to the dormitory all night, only Filchy G, who was in charge of the night watch, and his cat would hear screams and quarrels from the principal's room from time to time. Voice. Chapter 296 The first morning of the new semester. The next morning, Seal stared at two huge dark circles appearing in the auditorium of Hogwarts. Fortunately, Seal came relatively early, and there were not many people in the auditorium at this time. After quickly finding a not very conspicuous place, Seal threw the magic wand in his hand on the table in annoyance. Although the whole magic wand looked almost the same as Seal's original wand, Seal threw it on the table. But I know that this thing is not even as good as the model I bought in my previous life. After all, the model I bought is also a metal core, and it is not rusted, and the thing in my hand is pure iron inlaid wood. As for where this thing came from, I have to talk about Seal's experience last night. After Seal's death, he naturally received a mixed doubles from the old couple, or it was the unceremonious kind. After the old couple got tired of beating, they slowly sat back to their original positions, and mercilessly broke Seal's fantasy about the last salted fish semester, saying that such mixed doubles should be played at least once every 3 days. And Grindelwald kept taunting Dumbledore, to the effect that Mingmingshire could be said to have mastered the top power in the world, but under the protection of Dumbledore, his current combat power is still rubbish. With less than 3 years in hand, it is entirely possible for Seal to hammer everyone to the ground. In this regard, Dumbledore admitted his mistake generously, and said that he and Grindelwald would teach Seal well in the middle of the year, and strive to make Seal fulfill his wish to hammer everyone to the ground as soon as possible. Seal couldn't say anything other than a wry smile, but he seemed to have heard an unintelligible voice whispering something in his ear, a black face and a white face, and he knew my rabbit spirit and so on. Strange words. In addition to Shire's mixed doubles education, both Dumbledore and Grindelwald told Shire of their plans almost without reservation. As for Seal, after listening to the plans of the two, he could only sigh that the fanfiction did not deceive me. Dumbledore really deserves the title of the White Devil. The old man showed great kindness to everyone, but only he was ruthless to himself and his teammate Grindelwald, and even in the later stages of the plan, he was willing to bear the infamy to his death. Seal showed great opposition to the plan with the two of them, and even asked them to rectify their plans despite being beaten up. Then absolutely do not allow the people you care about to have any unpleasant situations. The three of them quarreled in the office for a night. In the end, the two Demon Kings lost to Seal, and they revised the whole plan according to Seal's thoughts and plans. After all, Seal even said that he would beat me to death today, and I absolutely would not agree. Not only that, but Seal also said that if he didn't revise it, he would secretly destroy the so-called plan of the two for the greater good, and he tried his best to give the two of them physical corrections for their fucking thoughts. Come over. And as the morning approached, he racked his brains and changed a lot of things that were hard to understand at first sight. Until the sun had completely leaked out of his face, Seal walked out of the principal's office contentedly. Went to the auditorium for breakfast. Before leaving, Grindelwald stopped Seal and asked him to give him a fake wand. Although Seal didn't need this thing at all now, in the spirit of keeping a low profile, Seal still accepted it honestly. Not to mention, after getting used to using his hands to achieve his dreams, Seal was really a little uncomfortable with this wand that represented the magical world. What Seal didn't know was that after he left, the long-established Black Demon King and White Demon King looked at each other and laughed in unison. After a long time, Grindelwald slowly stopped his laughter, and mocked Dumbledore with a smile. "I will say that this kid definitely has something in his mind. The only problem is that this kid is too lazy. If you don't squeeze him hard like toothpaste, and you never know if this kid will spit out something magical." Dumbledore agreed to Grindelwald's ridicule, and he made up his mind to make a heavy hand in the next point for Seal's special training. Of course, this night Shah was not without gain. I don't know why, when Grindelwald and Dumbledore beat him, I don't know if it was intentional and kept talking about the curse of beating him. That is, Shah, the magic of the self-proclaimed Old Fist curse. In any case, Seal felt that he must have memorized this spell, and was going to find some time to practice it himself. After all, it really hurts to beat people with this thing. Just as Seal was eating breakfast without a bite, and thinking about last night's plan, a figure sat beside Seal with a familiar fragrance of seal. Before Seal reacted. "Come over," the familiar chatter has already come to Charles's ears. "God, Charles, where did you go last night? The roommate I heard this morning said that you didn't go back to the dormitory last night. What did you do? Also, what happened to your eyes?" Hearing Hermione's question, Seal could only smile bitterly before answering Hermione honestly. "It's nothing. I was called by the teacher to discuss a little thing last night. As for the eyes, I can only say that the teacher is worthy of the name of Dumbledore. Anyway, I was educated very badly last night. If I think I need to go to the school hospital on the hour to get rid of bruises and swellings, I need to add a bottle of energy potion." Quote. Listening to Seal's question, Hermione wisely did not continue to ask, but turned around and changed the subject, and talked about today's first practical lesson on defense against the dark arts, and said she didn't know why she always felt this. Where did the teacher meet? Hermione's remarks scared Seal except for the white sweat all over his body, and in the end he could only fool the past with words like where he might have heard the same name. Hermione was still a little puzzled at first, but at this time, the auditorium had gradually started to become more crowded, and Seal had no intention of continuing to eat breakfast as the number of people gradually increased. After all, Seal still wore a pair of strange panda eyes. Seeing that Seal hurriedly ate the last few bites and left in a hurry, Hermione could only helplessly stop thinking about this new teacher. After thinking for a while, she took some breakfast from the table. After that, he got up and caught up with Charles. It is a good name to accompany Seal to the school hospital. After all, the first class this morning was the so-called Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Hermione really didn't want Seal to be lazy in the name of the school hospital. At least not the first class. Chapter 297 _ The Dark Lord's Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Hermione didn't think anything wrong. If it wasn't for Hermione's change, Seal really wanted to recover from last night's injury. After all, the world was crazy enough that Grindelwald came to Hogwarts as defense against the dark arts. The teacher of the class, Seal doesn't believe that this guy will give up the opportunity to beat himself upright in the class. It's just that the idea of pretending to be sick was shattered by Hermione's good intentions, and Seal could only hope that Grindelwald would take him lightly because of his affection last night. All in all, as long as he doesn't let himself down too much in front of Hermione, Seal is going to burn a lot of incense. As for the others, Seal has already expressed that he is tired and doesn't want to love anymore, so let's destroy it. Under the care of Hermione's running all the way, Shire and Hermione finally arrived at the legendary Dark Lord's classroom half an hour before the start of the first class of the new semester. At desperate request, Hermione sat in the middle of the class at the back. After a while, the little wizards of Gryffindor and Slytherin walked into the classroom in 2s and 3s, and Harry and Ron stepped into the classroom a few minutes before the start. And as soon as the two came in, they found Shire and Hermione sitting at the back of the middle row in the Gryffindor phalanx. After the two found a place to sit down, Luo Peng whispered in Harry's ear, saying, "Look, I'll say he'll be on good terms, and Hermione isn't sitting in the first row." Harry could only reluctantly shrug his shoulders in agreement. After all, the two have always been in pairs since they met. Neither Ron nor Harry was surprised by this result, but the two were no exception. They are very gossipy and want to know the specific process and time. Especially Harry. At this time, after Zhongchu met his eyes, he was full of thoughts on how to catch up with this beautiful senior. As for how Shire and Hermione determined their relationship, Harry was gossiping with a learning heart. While the two were chatting and discussing, Grindelwald pushed open the door of the classroom, walked gracefully to the stage, and looked at the little wizard who looked at him curiously below. Grindelwald smiled gracefully, then brushed the hair on his forehead back, and said loudly, "Now, put away your textbooks, take out your wands, stand up, one of my classmates. There's no need for those rote stuff from books." As soon as Grindelwald's voice fell, there was a burst of cheers from the teachers, and all the little wizards felt a sense of familiarity, and the joy of Professor Lupin last semester seemed to be back. The only person who was uncomfortable was Seal. Listening to Grindelwald's words, a bad premonition instantly enveloped Seal, and it soon became a reality. Seeing that all the little wizards stood up with their wands excitedly, Grindelwald smiled and waved his wands a few times. The tables and chairs originally placed in the classroom disappeared without a trace. Before all the little wizards could exclaim, the entire classroom began to expand at a speed visible to the naked eye. It swelled until it was about the size of 2 basketball courts, and the entire classroom stopped swelling. Although it was just a simple magic, this song by Grindelwald was very shocking to everyone, even the original one for this course. Disdainful little snakes. Seeing that everyone was quiet and looked at himself curiously, the smile on Grindelwald's face grew even stronger. He never thought that being a teacher would be such a fun thing. Looking at the quiet little wizards across from him, Grindelwald spoke again. "Okay, then everyone present, tell me, have you participated in any battles? Have you ever faced a dark wizard?" The little wizards who were still a little restless looked at each other after hearing Grindelwald's question, and all of them were dumbfounded for a while. Only Harry and Seal were experienced in this regard. The so-called dark wizards faced by people are all incomplete versions. Especially Seal, it is really a desperate battle to die, and only the Quidditch World Cup battle that just ended, and other battles can only be described as thrilling at most, but there is absolutely no danger to life. The most dangerous thing is to face Voldemort's remnant in the first grade. Looking at the silent wizards in the audience, Grindelwald sighed helplessly. Although he could roughly guess the result, compared to Demstrong, who had graduated from his own school, this group of Hogwarts was not as good. The little wizards who were born were all well protected by Dumbledore without exception. Looking at the confused little wizard, Grindelwald said again, "Well, it seems that none of you have faced the experience of any dark wizard, so this is also the meaning of this class. I'm here to teach you how to fight and defend against dark magic and some creepy dark creatures. But first, I need you to understand what fighting is. Notice, it's not the kind of one-on-one duel on the field, but a real battle, winning and continuing to enjoy the beauty of life. The loser can only die silently and rot in a corner that no one knows about." Listening to Grindelwald's words, the little wizards in the audience began to suck in the air, as if they had heard something surprising, but everyone had a surprisingly tacit understanding and did not interrupt Grindelwald's speech on stage. Discourse. Seeing the reaction of the little wizard in the audience, Grindelwald nodded with satisfaction, and then said, "Don't think I'm alarmist, believe me, when facing the dark wizard, failure can only mean death. Absolutely no chapter 2 turns out, even sometimes, death is a gift. So now all I have to do is teach you to fight and teach you to deal." Charles Lancaster, DQ, I think is the only little wizard who has actually participated in the battle. You must not mind acting as my assistant to show everyone what a real battle is, right? As Grindelwald's voice fell, Seal felt that his brows began to jump up, and Seal even started to roar in the depths of his heart, "Come. It's finally here. Seal walked out with a blank face. Without even thinking of quibbling, he could only give Grindelwald a secret look, hoping that he would be able to take it lightly later. Although Seal was about to cry inwardly, on the surface, Seal remained calm. My honor, Professor Johnny. Chapter 298 _ Battle of the Shire and Grindelwald. Hearing the gnashing of teeth in Seal's tone, Grindelwald felt inexplicably happier in his first teaching career. Seal looked at Grindelwald, and his heart was full of anger, but he had no choice but to pretend he didn't know him on the surface. To sum up, Seal's current state is actually in one sentence, that is, he's so angry. But still slightly, weigh 3 times, laughing. Seeing Seal standing helplessly in front of all the students, Grindelwald smiled and made a pleased gesture. Looking at Grindelwald's appearance, Seal knew that he would never be able to escape from this beating, and he simply no longer struggled. The attributes in the rabbit's DNA began to gradually occupy Seal's mind. Anyway, stretching your head is a knife, and shrinking your head is also a knife. Fuck it, if you can hit a curse on Grindelwald, you will earn it by yourself. With such a mortal idea in mind, Seal strode to Grindelwald's not far from Grindelwald, pulled out his fake wand from his waist, and began to gather the elements to prepare for the battle. Feeling that the surrounding elements seemed to be constantly gathering towards Seal, Grindelwald couldn't help laughing. Looking at the successful mischief in Seal's eyes, it was almost impossible to hide it. Wait, Student Seal, I think I made it very clear that our class is a combat class, not a duel class. After finishing speaking, Grindelwald waved his wand, and along with Grindelwald's movements, there began to be ups and downs among the huge teachers, and even a small stream appeared in the trees. In just a short while, the prestigious first-generation Dark Lord used his powerful magic to transform a forest terrain alive in a teacher who was enlarged by the space expansion curse. This hand quickly shocked all the little wizards again, and even Hermione and Harry were amazed. All the little wizards seemed to be seeing transfiguration for the first time. Out of the forest groping. Even the curious little wizard has begun to draw out his wand and began to stab the tree that Grindelwald had deformed, as if to see if he could restore the tree to its original state. To say that the only person with a gloomy expression to express his unhappiness is Seal, and the reason is very simple. Just when the entire forest was just formed, Seal's ear suddenly appeared in Grindelwald's voice. Seal has expressed that he is used to the sound transmission of these long-established guys, but the content of this potential transmission made Seal feel that his thoughts of wanting to be lightly beaten were shattered. Charles, you are absolutely not allowed to use even the slightest elemental magic in this battle, and you are not even allowed to use any elemental magic in the battle with me and Dumbledore this semester. Although he knew that the intentions of these 2 demon kings were to train himself, but losing his greatest advantage in front of everyone still made Seal feel that his integrity might not be guaranteed. In fact, Seal also understood in his heart, especially when he was in retreat in Dumbledore's pseudo-requirement room, Seal understood one thing. In terms of dignified combat and even large-scale damage, elemental magic is worthy of its reputation as war magic. But even so, we must not underestimate the magical development of wizards over the past 1,000 years. If the table is not turned over, the wizard's magic will occupy more and more strange, dexterous and even many tactics are revealed all the time. Dirty. Even Seal, who has mastered a lot of ancient magic and elemental magic, has to admit it. Seal gritted his teeth and nodded, and the moment the entire forest was completed, a flash disappeared in front of everyone. Seeing this scene, Grindelwald smiled very happily, but he still stood there carefree and even had the mind to explain to the little wizards who were standing not far from him. Have you seen it? Seal's first step is to hide and make full use of the terrain. In a real battle, when you don't know the specific strength of the enemy, hiding is undoubtedly the best method. Be careful to try and be cautious. Dodge, sometimes even the prey can kill a powerful hunter. Quote. Before Grindelwald's voice fell, a macro suddenly appeared behind Grindelwald, and hit Grindelwald's back in a daze. The little wizards around all made exclamations without exception, but Grindelwald didn't seem to care, and he didn't even bother to turn around, so he put an iron armor spell on himself and still stood in place. When the red light hit the iron armor charm, it was immediately bounced off, causing a small handful of dust on the ground beside it, and then the entire classroom fell silent again. Except for the abrupt red light of the song, Seal didn't it seems to have disappeared. Grindelwald didn't seem to be in a hurry either. He stood calmly on the spot and glanced around, and the atmosphere became gradually anxious in such a strange silence. Everyone present nervously couldn't help holding their breath, as if they were afraid of breaking the eerie silence on the battlefield. After a long time, Grindelwald seemed to be a little impatient. Looking at the silent forest, Grindelwald felt that he still overestimated Seal's integrity. If he didn't force Seal, this bastard would definitely be able to hide. Get out of class. Grindelwald, who was getting more and more angry, no longer hesitated, pointed his wand down, and instantly countless stones floated along with Grindelwald's movements. The stone rose to about a meter, and Grindelwald waved his wand, and all the stones instantly turned into a kind of bird with a long pointed beak but the size of a fist, accompanied by Grindelwald. The movement of waving the wand was like a sharp sword and began to fly towards the surroundings. Seal, who was hiding around the forest, quickly discovered this situation. Looking at the bird that was getting closer and closer, like a sharp sword, Seal scolded himself a few times, then stood up, turned around and ran. While running, he scolded Grindelwald for not talking about martial arts, and he was still thinking about how to deal with it. Soon Seal came up with a solution. As he ran, Seal waved the wooden stick in his hand. The land where Seal ran over began to bulge continuously with the use of Seal's magic, and it was only a few breaths. There appeared 7 identical Charas. The 7 Charles were just formed, and they spread their legs and ran out in different directions. Looking at the bird whose head was attracting attention, Seal waved his wand, and the cloak that was originally Hogwarts' school robe suddenly turned into a lucky suit for the jungle. Shutter took a position and hid it again, and started thinking about the next countermeasures. The clone is only a matter of rights and interests, far from being the solution. Perhaps Seal didn't realize it himself, but the moment Grindelwald used magic, a surge of excitement flooded into Seal's heart, causing Seal to subconsciously become excited. It seems to be a bit like the first grade. Seal muttered to himself with a smile on his lips, and touched his chest subconsciously. Unfortunately, this time Seal couldn't touch him when he was just entering school. It was full of safety. Chapter 299_colorful battle. The excited Seal was still lying on the newly found place and began to constantly think about how to use the magic only limited to wizards to hammer the long-famous Grindelwald. Yes, just hammer it. Especially when he touched his chest but didn't touch the bomb on his chest in the first grade, Seal's thoughts began to drift away unconsciously. If at this time, I have a big AK baby in my hand, can physics and magic fly together, and idealism and materialism coexist? As soon as this idea popped up in Seal's mind, it started to make Seal's thoughts go wild. He even started to make up his mind that there were no conventional tactical pendants attached to the big baby, but a magic wand, and he was shooting at the same time. Roar, this thing is much easier to use than magic. It's just that Seal's nonsensical imagination ran to him foolishly in a stone statue transformed by his transfiguration, and then was mercilessly strung into a hornet's nest by the sharp-billed bird transformed by Grindelwald. The scene where Chi-Chi turned into a pile of rubble was interrupted. Seeing all this in front of him, Seal couldn't help twitching the corners of his mouth, and couldn't help but scolded Grindelwald in his heart that it was true that he didn't hold back at all. Fortunately, the sharp-billed bird that was constantly circling in the sky was almost consumed by the self that Seal transformed into, and Seal no longer hesitated. Anyway, he couldn't imagine a good way to stand in the classroom. Nor can there be a place to escape like the first grade. It is better to find an opportunity to sneak attack on him, and then take a first-mover advantage. Maybe he can really accomplish his goal and give Grindelwald a shot. Thinking of Seal here, he no longer hesitated, reached out and touched a few stones and branches, and began to use polymorphism to deform a few stones and branches. In a short while, a few Seal wearing ghillie suits with Gryffindor swords in their hands lay beside the real Seal, and Seal nodded at his clone. A few clones instantly understood what Seal meant, and simply nodded as a response to Seal, and then dispersed quietly. On this side, Seal was quietly laying out his plans, while on the other side, Grindelwald, who was standing among a group of students, was not in a good mood. Seal's one-handed tactic is too time-consuming. In a normal battle, Grindelwald has some thoughts and waits for Seal, but now, let alone Grindelwald, even the man behind Grindelwald, the little wizards are starting to feel a little bored. Even some young wizards, especially some of Voldemort's die-hard family in Slytherin, have begun to ridicule Shire's cowardice and other topics. Hearing the chattering discussions of the little wizards behind him, Grindelwald also felt a little embarrassed, so Grindelwald, who made the decision to quickly understand the battle, simply stopped waiting for the strange layout of Seal. After looking up at the disappearing sharp-billed bird that he had transformed from the sky, Grindelwald pointed at the ground with his wand, and picked it up at random. With Grindelwald's movements, the originally solid ground seemed to have turned into soft sea water, and circles of waves began to appear with Grindelwald as the center. As the waves formed by the land get farther and farther away from Grindelwald, the waves formed by the soil and stones gradually start to get bigger and bigger, but after less than 3 meters away, they have become waist-high heights, and also is getting bigger. At this time, Seal, who was hiding in the forest, also felt the changes in the magic power of Grindelwald when he used his magic, and even felt a slight change in the earth element. In the blink of an eye, Seal, who hadn't figured out what was going on, saw a huge tidal wave like a tsunami from his boss appearing not far in front of him. The sudden change made Seal angrily scolding his mother. "Okay, you Grindelwald, you told me not to use elemental magic, but you used it happily." Although Seal was cursing on his lips, he was not slow at all in his hand, and he threw out 3 or 4 bursts of explosion curse when he changed his hand. The moment the curse touched the earth wall, a violent explosion occurred, forcibly creating a huge gap in the tall earth and rock wave, which just happened to let Seal escape the misery of being lifted into the sky by this strange earth and rock wave. Destiny. Of course, such a huge explosion also attracted the attention of Grindelwald. Between Grindelwald's mouth slightly raised a smile, and whispered that after finding you, he was too thin and dozens of red rays of light shot. "Go out." Seeing that the two finally started the real battle, the little wizards behind Grindelwald suddenly became excited. Everyone stopped discussing, and began to look at the battle in front of them with excited eyes. The red light emitted by Grindelwald rammed all the way to the front of Seal. Although there were countless trees on the way to fight for his brother, it couldn't stand the large number of spells that Grindelwald launched, and it was hard to plow out a straight road to Seal. Seal was startled when he saw the spell coming towards him, turned around and ran to the side, not forgetting to use transfiguration to simply conjure a wall of earth to block Grindelwald's spell. The implementation proved that Seal's idea was correct. The magic spell hit the dirt wall that Seal transformed and suddenly made a small pothole. In this way, Grindelwald kept his hand. If there was a real battle, Shire's rough earth wall was impossible to stop Grindelwald's spell. Taking advantage of the terrain, after avoiding Grindelwald's spell, Seal grabbed a tree and turned around, and then started running in the direction he came from. Was not afraid that Grindelwald would find his way. As for the tree that served as Seal's turnaround, the moment Seal let go, it was turned into a giant python and charged towards Grindelwald at a very fast speed. Grindelwald didn't panic when he saw the giant python attacking. Amidst the exclamations of the little wizard behind him, a magic spell turned the giant python into a piece of wood. By the time Grindelwald finished dealing with the python, Seal had turned the dirt wall into stones, and countless sharp stones floated in the air and flew towards Grindelwald quickly. Grindelwald looked at Seal's magic, his brows wrinkled unconsciously. It was obvious that Seal had beaten a bit, and he forgot that there were still a group of little wizards standing behind Grindelwald at this time. In the real battle, facing the Char's magic, Grindelwald may only need a simple shapeshift to dodge, but today it is obviously not possible. In desperation, Grindelwald raised his wand to prop up a translucent bubble-like protective cover. When the stone launched by Seal hit the transparent bubble again, it was like ice and fire, and they all turned into spun yarn. Seeing that Grindelwald used a spell that impressed Seal, after being stunned for a moment, Seal randomly raised a small wooden stick in his hand and hit it with dozens of rounds of the Old Fist spell. What surprised Seal was that this Old Fist spell was obviously not a simple spell. The spell that was originally launched failed a lot, and it might only be 3 or 5 shots when it actually reached Grindelwald. The sudden change made Seal froze in place. Chapter 300 _ Char. Seal's failure to launch the spell made Grindelwald burst into laughter, and he immediately understood Seal's careful thought of wanting to take revenge. As for why Seal failed, Grindelwald's heart is a clear existence. Let's not say that Seal has not practiced this spell, but as far as this spell is concerned, regardless of the effect, it just makes people feel like being attacked. The effect of a punch, but this spell is simple at all. As a temporary spell created by Grindelwald for the purpose of educating the Shire, this spell contains a mixture of launch spells, polymorphism, and all other messy little magics. If it were Dumbledore or even an ordinary Auror, it might be possible to discover the use of this spell at once, but it was clear that what the Seal lacked was an understanding of modern wizarding magic. Therefore, it is a matter of course that Seal fails to use such a half-baked spell. Of course, these are all small things. Compared with Seal wanting to take revenge on Grindelwald carefully, the failure of the spell is really something. It's too small a little thing. Grindelwald, who had seen through Seal's careful thinking, didn't hold back any longer. After blowing away a few Old Fist spells that Seal had successfully launched, he pointed his wand at Seal, and the trees around Seal seemed to come alive. In the same way, he continuously stretched out the branches a few times and bundled Seal, who wanted to escape, into a zongzi, and by the way, he swept away the small wooden stick in Seal's hand. Not only that, but Grindelwald also secretly stabbed the careful Seal in revenge, secretly fired a few Old Fist spells, and the beating Seal was miserable. Seeing that he was captured by Grindelwald, Seal also gave up the idea of resisting. After all, although he can't move now, there is no big problem if he uses magic. But if you really continue to resist, then there is no doubt that you will definitely expose that you can cast spells without a wand, and 1 or 2 spells can be fooled by casting spells without a wand. But if he resisted, it was definitely not something that could be fooled by wandless spellcasting, and Seal didn't think he could defeat Grindelwald by relying on his mastery of modern magic. But what Seal didn't expect was that Grindelwald's own thoughts were discovered by Grindelwald, and he was mercilessly retaliated, not to mention those Old Fist curses. Just being bundled into a zongzi, and then being carried upside down and brought to Grindelwald along with the tree man transformed by Grindelwald, Seal already felt that the breakfast he had eaten in the morning was about to spit out. Fortunately, the distance is not too far, and Seal can suppress the feeling that he wants to vomit. Otherwise, the society will really die. Seeing Seal being carried to him with a lifeless face, Grindelwald looked at Seal with a smile. Let's talk about it, sum up after the war. Hearing Grindelwald's words, Seal, who was being held upside down for too long, blushed and looked a little ugly. After a long delay, Seal said quietly, "You shouldn't use unfamiliar spells when fighting. You must use your own handy spells. And always pay attention to the battlefield environment, choose favorable terrain, and don't get distracted when fighting." Nope, Professor Johnny. Quote. Seal's last sentence with wandering eyes was almost said by clenching his back molars, and he secretly swore in his heart that he must study this damn Old Fist spell carefully after he goes back, and one day he will use this spell on Green. Endeavor. After listening to Seal's post-war summary, Grindelwald said he was very happy. After nodding his head, he didn't say anything. He waved his wand to loosen the restraints on Seal's body, and let Seal return to the team. If it weren't for the smile that couldn't be hidden in his eyes, Seal really believed that Grindelwald really let him sum up after the war. Of course, these little wizards who were present in these secret exchanges between the two did not know that the return of Seal made all Gryffindors very excited, and they began to comfort Seal, and some even began to inquire about Seal combat experience and plans. The only people who expressed some doubts about this battle were some pure-blood wizards in Slytherin, because the combat power shown by the seal in this battle did not match the combat power in their intelligence. In addition to the pure-blooded wizard with Slytherin's arms and doubts, Hermione is probably the one who is a little suspicious. As the person who knows Seal the most in the whole school, I don't know why Hermione always feels that Seal seems to know this. Professor Johnny Depp. The countless eye contact between the two was discovered by Hermione keenly. Although she didn't know what the two were communicating, there was definitely something. Hermione looked at Seal surrounded by the crowd and decided to find a time to ask. Charles. After Grindelwald let all the little wizards make a fuss for a while, he clapped his hands to attract the rest of the people's attention to him again. All the little wizards looked at him with curious and excited expressions, and Grindelwald's already good mood suddenly became better. Okay, let's put down our classmates' Seal for a while and talk about this battle. So which classmates found out from this battle? With the end of Grindelwald's question, the little wizards present raised their hands in unison. After Grindelwald glanced around, he still ordered a person he was more familiar with, Hermione. There are many professors. First of all, fighting is different from dueling, and it is necessary to develop favorable tactics based on the terrain. Second, although magic spells are very important in battle, the same other magic is also very important. In this battle, both Seal and the professor used a lot of transfiguration auxiliary spells at the same time. Although I don't know about Seal's arrangements in the woods in the early stage, I guess Seal must have made a lot of preparations. After Hermione finished speaking, she still didn't forget to take a look at Seal, which was considered to be distressing for Seal, and forcibly gave Seal a wave of respect. Hearing Hermione's words, Seal was a little embarrassed. In fact, his original plan was to die, but he was forced to change his strategy by Grindelwald. He wanted to arrange several clones to attack Grindelwald together, causing some empty space. Set aside time to prepare other plans. But unfortunately, Seal's preparations in the woods were all broken by Grindelwald's big wave. I dare not say anything else. The stone clones of pure Seal are under Grindelwald's big wave. It can fly high. Grindelwald didn't care what Seal thought, and was very excited after hearing Hermione's words. Great insight, Granger, 5 points for Gryffindor. Who else has a different idea? As Grindelwald's voice fell, the hands with countless advantages were raised, and everyone was full of ideas about this battle, but unfortunately, just when Grindelwald wanted to continue the roll call, the get-out-of-class bell rang. Stand up. Hearing the bell of the end of class, Grindelwald clapped his hands and said to the excited little wizards, Okay, it seems that our Char has been procrastinating in the woods for too long. So everyone, write your thoughts about this battle on parchment and turn it in as an assignment before your next class. No less than 1 foot, and students who have other ideas at the same time can also realize the ideas that are imminent. In the next class, I will be a different person to fight. Of course, if your homework is done well, it may become a team battle. Okay, get out of class. With Grindelwald's dismissal, the little wizards walked out of the classroom in 2s and 3s. For the first time, they didn't have any distaste for their homework, and they even started to look forward to the content of the next class. In the classroom, only Grindelwald looked at the mess on the ground and silently waved his wand to restore the classroom to its original state. He was constantly regretting that he should leave that little bastard Seal to help him restore the classroom together.